good morning to you. It's just after 6 o'clock on Sunday, January the 5th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Welcome along. Thanks ever so much for your company on a very dark, cold and snowy morning, actually, here in London. Anyway, great news to cheer you up this morning. It's National Bird Day today, a day dedicated to showing love and protection of our feathered friends. It's a time to raise awareness of the challenges that birds face globally, and also it should encourage actions to safeguard them. Lovely. Now, also today is whipped cream day, I say. So early. Today gives you the perfect excuse to indulge. Yes, the earliest known evidence of whipped cream, actually, appears in a recipe from 1549. That's right. Italian Renaissance cook Cristoforo di Messibugo listed whipped cream as an ingredient in one of his recipes. Yeah. Yum. Also, happy birthday to Bradley Cooper. He is actually one of the world's highest paid actors. He was also crowned sexiest man alive by People magazine in 2011. He actually turns 50 today, so happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Right, let's start today's show, shall we? Today's fascinating facts. So some really good ones this morning. Today's fascinating facts on this day in 1531. Pope Clement VII forbade English king, this is Henry VIII, to remarry. Of course, the ramifications of this were spectacular because the event led to the creation of the Church of England. If you don't like what they say, I'm having my own church. On this day in 1993, the oil tanker Brea was wrecked in hurricane-force winds off the Shetland Islands. I remember that very well, actually, discharging large amounts of crude oil. And then, very sadly, in 2001, a report funded by the Department of Health found that the convicted serial killer, former GP Harold Shipman, may have killed in excess of 300 of his patients. The official inquiry concluded that up to 15 patients who died between 1971 and 1974 at the former Pontefract General Infirmary could have been killed by Shipman based on an investigation into 137 deaths that occurred whilst he was a junior doctor there. The ramifications of that significant. It changed the way that doctors are now registered and licensed as a result of Harold Shipman. And that took place in 2001. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Wake up, it's a brand new day. David and the team, we're here to play. Sundays with us, your worries at the party.
Just when you think it won't get any sillier. Good morning, very good morning to you. 6:05 on Sunday, January the 5th. I'm David Bull. Hope you're well. Joining me this morning, Richard Blanco, broadcaster and host of the House Hunters International. Good morning.
Good morning.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, yes.
Did you have a fantastic time?
I did, actually, yes. I was actually here in the studio on New Year's Eve. It was great fun.
Oh, well done.
Yes.
Did you go to Spain?
No, but I'm going on Monday.
Ah, very
yes.
good. And how would I say Happy New Year in Spanish?
Feliz Año Nuevo.
Feliz Año Nuevo. Nuevo or Nuevo?
Nuevo. Yes.
Oh, there we are. So interesting, actually, about Bradley Cooper, American actor. He actually has had a lot of accolades. A British Academy Film Award, 2 Grammys. He's been nominated for 12 Academy Awards, 6 Golden Globes, a Tony Award. He's allegedly one of the sexiest men in the world. He's really had a lot of titles behind him. He came to prominence in Sex and the City, Wet Hot American Summer, The Wedding Crashers, Limitless, American Hustle. But I think probably his standout moment and where he really came to prominence was Silver Linings Playbook in 2012. Do you remember that?
Oh, I don't remember that, no, but I'm just looking at some pictures of him online and he is pretty handsome, isn't he?
Right. Yes, I guess so. But he was crowned, what, the sexiest man alive by People magazine in 2011. Anyway, that's Bradley Cooper. We should talk about today. Now, this is controversial, but I think today is 12th night. Some people think tomorrow is 12th night.
Yes.
And you were saying that in Spain, this is also to do with Epiphany.
It is very important in Spain because actually what happens is on the 5th you open your presents at midnight, and the idea is that the 3 wise men arrive at midnight with the presents and you open them, and then you have a big meal on the 6th as well for lunch. Well, it's 3 o'clock lunch in Spain. So
well, it's about the right time.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's a big deal, actually. It's called Reyes, and we have these wonderful roscones de Reyes, which have got...
Roscones?
Yes, which have got candied fruit on top, and we hide something inside them, and whoever gets, like, the gift inside is going to have luck for the rest of the year. And we usually fill it with whipped cream just to connect to one of your, your earlier items.
How extraordinary. And, of course, it depends whether you count Christmas Day as the first day of Christmas or whether it's Boxing Day as the first day of Christmas.
Yeah.
And also, Twelfth Night, which obviously Shakespeare wrote about, Twelfth Night doesn't mean the night. It means the night means the eve. So it's complicated. But obviously, in this country, it is believed to be bad luck if you don't take your Christmas decorations down by the end of Twelfth Night.
The 6th, isn't it, normally? When
I think it's the 5th, but... Let us know your thoughts.
I mean, I always take mine down on the second. Yeah,
I'm running home. I'm running home to take mine down.
Oh, I'm fed up of it by the second. You know, I just like want to get on with the rest of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
I always think the house looks so denuded.
Yes.
Because it's so fabulous and festive,
Yeah.
and then of course you take it all down and it looks miserable and cold and it's snowing and all the rest
It's
of it.
just terrible, isn't it? When you take the decorations down, it really is awful.
It really is awful. Well, let us know. Do you think tonight is 12th night or is tomorrow 12th night? I guess it depends when you start counting Christmas. But I would have thought Christmas Day is the first day of Christmas, but...
I would have done as well, yes. There you go.
Right, let's move on and talk about the papers this morning. There's a lot going on in the papers, and of course tomorrow the parliamentary term resumes. This is a big story in the Sunday Times this morning. NATO is going to urge Keir Starmer to significantly increase spending on air and missile defence. This is the big headline in the Sunday Times this morning. NATO warns the UK over ballistic missile threats. We have spoken at great length about the amount of GDP we spend on defence. We're spending about 2.3% of GDP on defence. Many people are saying it needs to go up to 2.5%. I personally think it should be 3.5 up to 5%. But essentially, there is going to be a formal request made by NATO when the military alliance issues members with their updated force requirements. And many NATO countries, including the United States, are saying to Britain, come on, pull your finger out. You need to put more cash in.
Yeah, it's true. And in fact, this is a bit of a scary read, I think, David, because it's talking about the range of missiles and that it'd be pretty easy to, send a missile to London from somewhere in the Middle East, where there are a number of rogue states, of course, at the moment. And, of course, there's going to be pressure from the new Trump presidency, I think, to really up spending on defence.
I would agree.
So, yeah, pretty scary read there in the Sunday Times.
And, of course, the Strategic Defence Review, many people are saying, why are we waiting so long for this defence review? Because we're actually left ourselves in a position of enormous vulnerability. I mean, if you remember back to Admiral Sir Tony Radakin, the Chief of Defence Staff, which was last month, he said the world is facing a third nuclear age. This is also, as part of the SDR, this Strategic Defence Review, there is a NATO blueprint called the Capability Target 2025. As you rightly say, we have been concentrating on nuclear weapons, but actually these other missiles can be equipped with conventional warheads, but they can travel so fast that what they're saying is that Britain could be hit by a missile from anywhere in the world. In 15 years' time, they're saying a ballistic missile will be able to hit Britain from anywhere in the world, but it's a very expensive problem to fix. I would suggest that actually multiple governments have been asleep at the wheel.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think they've been stuck in this sort of Cold War mindset with the focus on nuclear, when actually we need to be thinking about the range of these non-nuclear missiles, and also whether, some sort of naval vessel coming close to the UK could potentially be a threat. I think the issue about it being pushed into the long grass is the lack of money. And, we're seeing that...
But they've just stolen all this money from everyone, with 20 billion whole, another 20 billion, 40 billion. Actually, and I said this to you earlier on, if we don't have defence of the realm, we have nothing. It's all very well having net zero, but there's no country left.
I agree, but I think this government has an ambitious list of things it wants to achieve, and it can't do them all at once.
Shouldn't defence come first?
Well, I think defence is very important, but then they will probably argue that it's more important to get more teachers in schools, to try and deal with the waiting lists in the NHS. And, of course, we've got this Social Care Commission that's coming up.
Which has also kicked it into the long grass till 2028.
Again, I think that's because of lack of money, because,
Is it a lack of money or a lack of political will?
Well, I think, they're hoping we get some growth. It's not looking very likely at the moment, is it? And that, the tax take will go up and we will have more money to spend on those kinds of ambitions.
Just looking at this, and you're right, it's a really sobering read this morning. I hate to give you some bad news, but Iran has an arsenal of approximately 3,000 ballistic missiles. These things travel at 4,600 miles an hour. And also Russia has more hundreds of intercontinental ballistic missiles as well. They go at Mach 10. That's incredibly fast. So there is no warning.
No, and do you remember the 1st of October when Iran sent 200 ballistic missiles to Israel?
I do.
And apparently our defence minister was in Cyprus at the time, and that was a real wake-up call for him. And incredibly, Israel shot most of them down. Now, I'm not sure we have that sort of capability at the moment.
Well, we don't, and also Israel is a discrete country, i.e. it is relatively small, so you can have the Iron Dome. But also, just looking at the way that, say, the United States relies on the United Kingdom, initially, and you're right, Akrotiri, which is our strategic base over there, I think that was the wake-up call. But when Tehran launched its first round of strikes, we eliminated the drones, the cruise missiles, ballistic missiles. This was a US alliance with the United Kingdom. By the time of the second round, we were demoted because basically the US can't rely on us because we don't have the capability.
Well, exactly, and I think that's one of the dangers, that the UK will just become, one of the faces in the background, that it doesn't have a place at the table.
I think it's deeply concerning. I think politicians, I get your point about the health service and education, but actually I think defence is right up there. And when you talk to people in government, they are deeply nervous that we have basically sleptwalked into this. When you look at other stuff, I remember back in June, General Sir Patrick Sanders saying our UK tank fleet is embarrassingly small. We are no longer a tier 1 nation. That's what many people are saying. And so actually I think the politicians have to level with the public. And if you remember, when Labour came into power, they also enacted 500 million quid's worth of cuts and cut all of these major programmes. They cut HMS Albion, Bulwark, a Type 23 frigate, the Chinooks, a Puma medium lift. There is no plan for a replacement whatsoever. It is very short-sighted. And I think things like defence, actually, should probably be cross-party and a 20-year strategic plan.
I think there's a real issue about modernisation of public services, and, we can include defence in that we've got creaking infrastructure that needs massive investment, and defence is part of that problem as well, isn't it?
Why have we got creaking infrastructure?
Well, you could argue that austerity caused it, in the last decade, COVID potentially, and, inflation has been incredibly unwelcome, hasn't it? But, of course, that's been partly because of COVID, and it's just meant that there's less money to invest in public services.
I also think it's been just poor fiscal management by the last government as well, and, of course, we've seen inflation go up, the real-life costs of people's trying to pay their mortgage, for example, and we've seen the devastation that has caused. By the way, let's move on, shall we, and talk about the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. This is also going to make you choke on your cornflakes or your ricicles this morning. Sunday Telegraph, this is about net zero. Net zero drive will raise cost of holidays, right? I think all of us looking to get away. A new net zero flight tax on airlines risks adding hundreds of pounds to the cost of family holidays. So this is to do with their sustainable aviation fuel. So basically a new mandate which says that you have to have 2% green fuel. That goes up to 10% of green fuel, 22% of green fuel in 2040. So lumping even bigger costs onto the airlines, which will pass it on to the consumer. I would like to know, who voted for net zero?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is a big problem, I think. It's called sustainable aviation fuel. This was a new measure that was brought in on the 1st of January. Now, there are wildly conflicting figures. One figure says that it could add 20% to the cost of a holiday by 2040. That's £302 for a family of 4. Another figure here says it could be as little as £9.40 per ticket by 2040. I think the problem is there's not much of it available at the moment.
Exactly.
Not much of it is manufactured. And so what the government are expecting is that as demand increases, more will get manufactured and the price of it will go down. But we shall see.
That's very bizarre logic.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that if you're really invested in kind of green technology, the idea is that you've got to kickstart it and
At what cost, though, to the consumer? This is the bit that it just feels to me you've got increasingly draconian government saying, you will not have a gas boiler, you will not fly, you will not do X, Y and Z. And actually, at the end of the day, the government works for the people, for the punters. And the punters don't want net zero in this way. And I've said this a great deal, which is, I think you can embrace the idea of net zero, but this artificial timeline of 2030, when you've got India, China, Russia building all of these power stations, and we, of course, are basically wearing Hessian underwear.
Yes. I mean, I agree with you on that. I think the timing is a big problem here, that 2030 sounded OK, you know, 10, 15 years ago, but as we're coming close to it, because of the cost of living crisis, I just think there's no appetite for wearing those Hessian underpants.
Certainly not from me. Let me be very clear. We'll talk more about net zero. Actually, get in touch. What do you think about this? So now you can't even go away. You're going to have all these levies. There's a plastic levy coming in as well. I don't think anyone has actually voted for net zero. Let me know your thoughts on that. Let's move on now. Yesterday, we spoke a lot about the dissatisfaction with Keir Starmer. This is the front page of the Mail. Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. This is what I said yesterday. The level of dissatisfaction with the Labour government, not just from the voters, but also I think traditional Labour voters are very unhappy with the Labour Party and the direction of travel from Keir Starmer. I think a lot of people in the Labour Party are sharpening their knives. But this is going to make very tricky reading for Keir Starmer.
Yeah, I mean, there's talk of Andrea versus Wes, isn't there, in the press, actually, this weekend, that, you know, she made a comment that she was in competition with Wes Streeting. That's, Angela Rayner, yes.
Crikey, Angela Rayner as Prime Minister. There's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think they've had a disastrous start, really, haven't they? Winter fuel allowance was the first announcement that was made and, you know, turned a lot of people against the new Labour government. What's happening around inheritance tax with the farmers. Private school fees, of course, is causing a lot of issues at the moment, and all of the freebies that they had. I saw there's a piece on council tax being covered by, the public purse for Rachel Reeves' second home, etc.
I mean, that makes terrible reading.
It does,
What was it, 10 grand?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the argument is that MPs are entitled to claim those sorts of costs.
Which they are.
But they've gone off to a really bad start. And if you compare it to the 1997 beginning of the Tony Blair government, when there was a lot of enthusiasm and excitement and there was a real kind of wave of positivity, we've had a real wave of negativity, haven't we? It's been so different, such a contrast. And how much of that is down to Keir Starmer's leadership and how much of it is down to the fact that we're in a kind of difficult post-COVID period?
Do you know, I just think he doesn't get it. He's so robotic. He trots out the same lines. Rachel Reeves, the same thing, 20 billion hole, fixing their foundations. He doesn't seem to understand that a lot, and you're right about the winter fuel allowance. I think it's the most absurd policy to bring in as your first policy, where you're penalising elderly people. Then you go on some ideological campaign where you put VAT on private schools, which means that kids are going to end up in the public sector. In fact, I was being told that up in Scotland there are no schools in certain areas, and there are kids that can't get into the state system because they haven't thought this through. The money doesn't work. Then you attack the farmers, and so then we've got food insecurity issues. I mean, who's advising them?
Absolutely, who is advising them? I think the problem with Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves is they're both kind of technocrats, really, and there's a lack of charisma. And
that's the difference with Blair, because he was very charismatic, particularly in '97.
It just shows you how important charisma and performance ability really is for politicians, but also getting the right advice and, putting the right messages across. I wonder if they can turn it round in 2025. I hear what you're saying about this potential, Keir Starmer out within a year. I think that's partly because we got so used to that with the last government, didn't we? The Labour Party would say we're determined to bring in stability, and with such a huge majority, it would seem very odd, the idea that Keir Starmer might be out in a year. But, we're hearing from Labour politicians that are saying that they're very frustrated about what they're hearing on the doorstep.
Well, look at the MRP poll I spoke about yesterday, done by Stonehaven. Labour loses 133 seats at the moment. So many of those young Labour MPs who think, oh, I've got a job for life, now thinking, oh, hang on, maybe I haven't got a job for life. So it will be fascinating. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Thank you for the moment, Richard. That got me thinking this morning about the threat to Keir Starmer. Who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Is it the Conservative Party? Is it the rise of Reform UK? Is it international affairs? Is it his own party? Is it those Labour MPs who are thinking, hang on a minute, I don't like the direction of travel? Is it Wes Streeting? Is it Angela Rayner sharpening their knives? I think he is under threat. The question is, who or what is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can also text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X at talkTV. Also, we're very keen to get voice notes as well. Dave loves a voice note. So do send those voice notes in and get dialing as well. Who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Richard will take us through more of this morning's papers after this break.
He's very happy to take opinions on the UK, also in Germany. Now, whether that money that seems to be dangled in front of reform, whether that materializes, will be very interesting. We're talking sums like 100 million. Reform could make very good weather of that. That could be a real game changer for reforms, expanding itself even when we get up to local elections in May.
Oh, it certainly could be a game changer, and I guess watch that space.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Talk 626 on Sunday, January the 5th. I'm joined by Richard Blanco, broadcaster and host of the House Hunters International, who was telling me all about the Spanish traditions of New Year and Epiphany, and you're very well versed in that. I'm very impressed.
Oh, I absolutely love Roscones de Reyes, that's the thing, and it's great fun.
So why didn't you bring them in? That's what
I know, you can't get them in this country. I suppose I could have made one, but I'm going to Madrid on Monday, so I'm hoping that usually the cafes have them for a few weeks afterwards.
Roscones?
Yes.
Sounds wonderful. I'm sure they're not very good for you.
Oh, it's just a bit of sweet bread, you know, with a bit of whipped cream.
Well, and of course today being whipped cream day, which is very exciting
absolutely,
indeed.
yes.
Talking of not being very healthy, there are two big health stories this morning. Let me just show, this is the front page of the Sunday Times. Patients must get choice of 5 hospitals. So Wes Streeting trying to take control of the NHS. I mean, look, we're spending 200 billion quid on the NHS. The outcomes are pretty terrible when you compare them with our European neighbours. So something has to give. Now, what he's saying here is doctors must offer patients a choice of 5 hospitals when they refer them from treatment. This is according to Wes Streeting. He's vowed to end the like it or lump it culture. Now, tomorrow is this big speech by Starmer where they're going to set out the government plan to reduce the NHS waiting list. We know on the primary waiting list, 7.5 million people. And we spoke about this yesterday. There's going to be this NHS app. You're going to be able to request 5 different hospitals. That's not the issue here, actually. I just kind of think this is window dressing without actually sorting out a much bigger problem.
I agree with you on this. I mean, I think, you know, do I really care about choosing between 5 hospitals? I actually think the app, and my understanding is we're going to use the existing app, the one that came about during COVID. So the use of the app, I think, is great. I can use an app now to book a GP appointment.
Which is good.
Which is fantastic, yeah, because that used to be really difficult. But no, this certainly isn't top of my list, wanting a choice of hospitals. I think what's top of my list is, you know, modernisation. You know, I was listening to a GP yesterday talking about how every time they refer you, they have to write a letter to...
That's right.
You know, it's very 1947 or whenever the NHS started, isn't it?
48.
You know? 48, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, so it is complicated. And also, if you say to the patient, which hospital would you like to go to, how do they know which one to go to? What Streeting is saying is that there's a trade-off between going locally, which I understand, and then going to a centre of excellence. He had cancer. He chose to go to a centre of excellence, but he's in a position where he's informed, where he can talk to people and say, well, where is the best hospital to do this? Now, in my own family history, I had a big discussion with my father over whether I wanted him in a centre of excellence, he wanted to go to a local hospital. I think he made the wrong decision. He went to a local hospital. I think I was right because I think you need to be in a centre of excellence. The question I have here is how on earth do people know what the best hospital is?
Well, interestingly, they're kind of mirroring what happens in private healthcare, because if somebody has private healthcare insurance, they then choose which hospital they want to go to.
They do.
And that actually requires quite a lot of research, and it's quite difficult to make an informed decision. I mean, you go online and look at different consultants, and I'm not sure how many people are going to have the resources to do that, really.
I would agree. He says patients feel powerless. They lack control. It's still stuck in the age of one-size-fits-all, top-down, like it or lump it. Look, I think there are ways that we can actually make the system far more streamlined. I really welcome the idea that GPs can actually refer patients directly for tests without actually going through the consultant. All of that makes sense, actually.
I think there's something about quicker access to consultants. I feel a bit infantilised sometimes by the NHS, that I have to kind of, you know, beg, steal or borrow from my GP and ask for access to hospitals and consultants. And I wish I had easier access myself to
refer yourself directly?
Somehow, I'm not quite sure how it would work, and I appreciate that, you know, you need some clinical understanding, etc. But if you've got an ongoing issue that you're, you know, often if you have an ongoing issue, you become quite expert on it. And
well, so one of the other things is we have this kind of bizarre system where the GP is the gatekeeper. So you have to go to the GP. Now, if you've got a rash, let's say, it would be, and certainly what they do in America is you would see a dermatologist.
Yes.
You wouldn't go to a GP.
That's the kind of thing that I mean, yes. Yeah.
Well, there's another story as well this morning, if you are just waking up. The Sunday Telegraph, Streeting rids the NHS of pointless checkups. So tomorrow they're going to unveil the app. He's now saying you've got the choice of 5 hospitals, but he's also vowing to scrap more than 1 million pointless NHS hospital appointments as he seeks to cut waiting lists. He says that these are a waste of time. Now, I'm a clinician, or I'm a doctor by training. I read this and I thought, how does Wes Streeting know what is an appropriate follow-up after elective surgery, because actually when you've had an elective procedure, I do think it's really important that you have a follow-up. Now, there are ways of doing those follow-ups. It could be that you can do it virtually, just doing a quick Zoom call, or you have to see someone. But I'm not sure. He talks about telemetry, the role of AI, all of that kind of stuff. This is actually, there's something that people have been trying to do for about 10 years. I'm not sure we're quite there yet.
Well, I mean, this is the whole issue of who should manage clinical services. Should it be clinicians or managers, or indeed politicians?
Clinicians.
Yes, and of
is
course,
the answer.
Clinicians is the answer, yes.
Well, I don't know, and obviously they're trying desperately to use this as political capital to move the agenda on. How successful do you think that will be?
Well, we have to hear what they've got to say tomorrow, of course. I think the public is really waiting for change on the NHS because, you know, lots of us come into contact with the NHS on a day-to-day basis, and people are really fed up of the service that they're getting.
So also, when you look electorally, what's important? So immigration, the economy, health service, number 3 of those. I think what they have to do is to persuade people they are the right party to do that. One thing I would just caveat this with, elderly people being driven onto an app. Many older people, I'm not saying all of them, but many older people don't like that. They like to phone someone. They want to talk to someone. They want an appointment they can write in a paper diary. They don't want it done on an app, and I'm not sure the government really gets that.
I am really torn on this because I am desperate for things to be digitised. You know, I don't want...
but you're a young man.
Well, this is it. And you know, I've got a sister who's quite a lot older than me who really struggles with anything digital. In fact, I have to pay for stuff for her over the phone and stuff like that because she's anxious about giving out her details. And so I really understand what you're saying here. How do we, I don't know how we square this circle, how do we digitise and still retain access for people who don't feel they can cope with digitisation?
I think you have to offer both, actually.
Yeah.
So you move towards a technological revolution, but at the same time, it's really important that... And the elderly people are the ones that are most likely to use those healthcare services.
It's true. I mean, I guess it's like disability. If somebody is disabled and needs, you know, some kind of access for them to be able to access services, some sort of adaptation, then we make that. And I guess that's what we have to do for people who are non-digital. I do think we should try harder to get older people. Of course, not all older people struggle with digital stuff. I think we need to try harder as a society to bring them on board.
I do too. Just very quickly, on the Spanish theme this morning, we're talking about good morning to Adam and Steve, watching in Marira. Fab show as always. Very good morning to you boys. Also, this one, Peter is in Mijas in southern... We're very big in Spain. In southern Spain, where the Epiphany Parade took place last night. It was, as usual, very colourful. It was very friendly. There were 3 polar bears representing the 3 kings. Wow. He goes on to say, and this is the question I'm asking this morning, who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. He says the biggest threat to Starmer is reform, and he knows it. We'll talk more about what's hitting the papers, the main stories in today's papers after this break. Don't go anywhere. Who or what is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? You tell me.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. 6:37, Sunday, January the 5th. I'm joined by Richard Blanco, who's taking us through all of this morning's papers. So many messages coming in because I asked this question and it really got me thinking this morning. Who or what is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Is it another political party? Is it the Conservative Party? Is it the Lib Dems? Is it Reform UK? Is it Nigel Farage saying he's going to attack Kemi Badenoch also? That's quite interesting, in northwest Essex. Is it Angela Rayner? Is it Wes Streeting? Is it the Labour activists? Is it the attack on the working class or the working people of this country? Is it the farmers? Are they going to be the biggest threat? Let me know. Call me 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. Good morning to you, Paul in Hertfordshire. Good morning, David. I love your show. Thank you. That's very kind. The biggest threat to Keir Starmer is, of course, Keir Starmer. Being unable to do the job, he somehow has made him his greatest threat. For all our sakes, just go, Starmer, and take your useless government with you. That's Paul in Hertfordshire. I'll tell you one other person I think is a threat. Elon Musk.
Yep, absolutely. And there's this idea that he might give a big chunk of money to reform, isn't there? And I actually think reform is a serious threat. I think it's something like 80 seats where reform is the biggest opposition to Labour, you know, could well be gathering more and more support. So
it's quite interesting, this, because, and obviously I have a vested interest, but I'm trying to be as objective as possible. What is interesting about this is, under our current system of first past the post, reform is now at a tipping point. So at this point, suddenly the mathematics change dramatically, because obviously it's weighted against you. So if you get sort of 4 or 5 million votes, you get 5 members of parliament. But as you go over that, you suddenly exponentially get a lot more. And that's really interesting.
The issue's going to be the electoral system, the first past the post system, isn't it, really?
Yes.
Yeah, whether they can break through.
David, the biggest threat to Keir Starmer is Keir Starmer. That's Mick in Wallington. Good morning to you. Good morning, David. I'd say that Labour have killed themselves from day one, the way they attacked every corner of British society, compared to every person that chooses to illegally enter our country, who get priority treatment. It's really interesting. TF, good morning to you as well. Great show, thank you very much. The biggest threat to Keir Starmer is Keir Starmer. Everyone is saying he is the biggest liability. Yep, and we talked about his lack of charisma, and of course one of the problems is you can't really learn charisma, can you? You've either got it or you haven't, no. And I do think it's very interesting that, you know, this joke that Angela Rayner made about there being a competition between her and Wes Streeting, and it kind of opens up potential discussion about who's going to come next. So who is going to come next?
Well, I mean, I think either could potentially lead the party. I suspect it might be Wes Streeting, actually.
I would agree with that. There was a lot of talk, actually, on social media this morning saying how the late-night chat shows are now talking about life after Starmer. And if you're now at that stage in the electoral cycle, that is a big problem for Starmer.
It is, because there's 4 years to go. But, you know, I'm not sure...
Or is there?
Yes. I'm not sure if what this is about the rhythm that we got used to under the last government. Of, you know,
what, musical chairs?
Change a year or change every 3 weeks or whatever. And, you know, maybe it's going to take another year of Keir Starmer before we get used to the fact that you can actually have a Prime Minister for 5 years.
Well said. Let's take you through this morning's papers if you are just waking up. Let's start with the Sunday Times. We've talked about this story. NATO warns the UK over ballistic missile threats. NATO urging Sir Keir Starmer to significantly increase spending on air and missile defence. This investigation by the Sunday Times, a sister publication of this channel, reveals the UK is increasingly vulnerable to ballistic missile attacks. We were talking about this, the Capability Target 2025, the Strategic Defence Review as well. But there are some very worrying things that are highlighted in this. The Royal Navy warships risk being struck by more advanced ballistic missiles from Iran and Russia. Britain's military overseas bases, which we talked about, Akrotiri, for example, under threat as well. Militant groups in war-torn Middle Eastern countries like Libya could strike London if they were to acquire long-range missiles. And senior defence sources are warning the UK is in peril now. That's stark. And within 15 years, a ballistic missile will be able to hit Britain from anywhere in the world.
Interesting, there's nothing here about cyber attacks, is there? And that's something I'm really worried about. And that can, you know, disable our hospitals and power stations, etc. And then, you know, we can have all of the defence capabilities that we want, but actually if the power stations aren't working. So, you know, it's interesting that that's not included in this.
And, of course, we're spending 2.3% of GDP on defence, but actually on conventional weapons, that drops to about 1.6%.
Yes, absolutely.
Which really isn't enough. That's the front page of the Sunday Times. Also, the side column here, patients must get a choice of 5 hospitals, which we spoke about earlier. This will exercise you this morning. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Yeah, that's right. Holidays are going to go up. That's right. Net Zero Drive will raise the cost of holidays because they have to have this new sustainable aviation fuel. So 2% at the moment has to be sustainable, which, by the way, we don't have very much of. It's very expensive, but obviously we're going to have to pay the price of that. And then it goes up to 10% and then 22% by 2040. And guess what? So the families are going to be lumbered with 300 quid on top of their already expensive holidays. Lord McKinley, the chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, says British people need to go on holiday whilst you can.
It's true. I mean, that's the most pessimistic figure, isn't it? It could be £9.40 per flight by 2040. What I'm hoping...
Oh, come on top of APD as well. And
yeah,
so,
that's
you
true.
know, it's a cash cow for government.
I know. Listen, I feel miserable about this. You know, airfares went up quite a bit this autumn, I think, didn't they? They seem to have dropped back down a bit again. I just think the timing on this, as I said earlier, is terrible. We're still in a cost of living crisis, and many people just don't feel they can afford this sort of luxury.
No, and of course, on top of this, I mean, Rees-Mogg described the new rules as a flight tax and calls it more green madness. When you then look at the grocery tax, the packaging tax, what else have we got here? The boiler tax, which they didn't dare enact, because essentially people don't want heat pumps, so they're buying gas boilers because they're far cheaper.
I think what we've got to do with a lot of this stuff is wait until the technology gets better, and that's certainly how I feel about air source heat pumps. They're just too expensive and they're not efficient enough at the moment.
No. And also, even with government grants, when you look at a heat pump, you have to decide, is my house insulated enough? Will the heat pump actually work? Then Ed Miliband says, well, you can make them much bigger and they can be noisier. Oh, well, that's going to be great for the neighbours, isn't it? And then also, if you live in a traditional or very old house like I do, what use is a heat pump? I might as well do, you know, aerobics to keep the house warm.
I totally agree with that. I mean, there's a big problem around, you know, the huge number of Victorian houses that we've got that you can't externally insulate because we don't want to get rid of the street scene that we all enjoy of all of those Victorian houses. And then if you try and insulate them internally, you've got to move all of the radiators and you've got fireplaces and stuff like that. So it's very complicated, and I think the prospect of getting heat pumps in their current state in Victorian houses is very low. We've got to wait for the technology to improve.
You tell the government. Let's also move on to the front page of the Mail poll. Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. This is a bad headline for the Prime Minister. Sir Keir Starmer will be ousted as Prime Minister within a year. This is according to a poll for the Mail. Furious voters attacking his poor handling of the economy, the NHS, immigration, the cost of living crisis. Now, they looked at this, the State of the Nation survey. Apparently, the Labour leader will last at most a year, more than 2/3 saying he's doing badly 6 months into the job. 1 in 5 voters thinks Nigel Farage will be Britain's next Prime Minister.
Yes, I know. I mean, I heard this rumour from various friends sort of a few months ago. It all sounded a bit you know, pie in the sky and ridiculous. But who knows? Stranger things have happened, I guess.
See, I think it's accurate.
Do you?
I do. I do. Just in terms of, I mean, we talked about this yesterday. I mean, obviously, I'm partisan, but 170,000 people have now joined Reform UK. And they are not traditional, necessarily traditional Conservative voters. They are also coming from Labour because they're so disaffected by what is going on. There is definitely a massive shift going on politically, which I haven't seen in my lifetime. I'm going to be talking, actually, to the Future Politics panel later on. This is at 8:20. Nathan Robbins and Aditya Dattatreya will be joining me, and it will be quite interesting to get their thoughts on all of that. Thanks for the moment, Richard. We'll go to a break. Let me ask you that question once again. Who or what is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The poll, Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. Front page of the Mail. Your thoughts, please. 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. After the break, we'll go through more of this morning's front pages. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Doesn't say the government isn't going to look at the wider problem. So last night, when this story broke, I was hearing from the government that, you know, we're not saying we're not going to do an inquiry. Watch this space. So, and I would urge them, for what my two pennyworth is worth, I would urge them to actually set up a national inquiry that can look at everything in context. I think the government can't do, the central government can't do 20 different inquiries into. There's so many. It's a multi-headed hydra. Yeah. So, I mean, we need to look at the thing across the piece.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back, 6:50. This is Weekend Breakfast, Sunday, January the 5th. Richard Blanco joins me this morning. We're in the middle of taking you through this morning's front pages. Let's move on to The Observer, and another story that will infuriate Peter Pill, I'm sure. Fears of unrest as the Prime Minister considers open prison for more offenders. Ministers are considering relaxing restrictions on inmates who can be sent to open prisoners, despite warnings the move could increase the risk of violence, of drug abuse and riots. This was unannounced by the Conservative Party. It's been expanded by Labour, but essentially they're trying to ease the overcrowding crisis. They're moving people into these low security jails. However, Richard, 140 people absconded. They just did a runner. So we are putting public safety at risk because we have failed to build those prisons. I imagine people around the country are thinking this is another abject dereliction of duty.
Yeah, there are so many problems with the prison service at the moment. I mean, where do you begin? I think the real issue for me is about reoffending. You know, that we're not doing enough to turn people's lives around. But yeah, if we're putting the wrong people in open prisons, then that is absolutely putting the public at risk, and it's something that we need to do a lot better on. What can we do about prisons, though? You know, we've got to build more, and you can't build them overnight. I mean,
and deport foreign criminals. That is the key to this, because, you know, just the sheer numbers of foreign criminals in British prisons, I think, is outrageous.
I don't know if you heard any of the Reith lectures this year, but they were absolutely brilliant. They were on the causes of violence and why people behave in a violent way.
Oh, yeah.
And they were talking about the Norwegian system, where prison officers are trained in sort of the rehabilitation of offenders and so on. And the whole approach is so different. And I really think we've got to kind of totally turn our system around.
You need to look at societal decline, the lack of role models. The fact is we don't have youth centres in the same way, so we don't keep people off the streets. Just out of interest, 10,000 foreign criminals in British prisons, and we only have a capacity of 88,000.
Well, why are we not deporting those?
Very good question. Robert Jenrick said this. We need to deport every foreign criminal. I would agree. That's the front page of The Observer. Let's move on to the Sunday Express. In the bleak midwinter, the NHS braced for a perfect storm as deadly combination of freezing temperatures, surging winter viruses threatens to push the health service to breaking point. The Royal College of Emergency Medicine says there will be 14,000 unnecessary deaths due to A&E delays this winter. Also, I would like to just add into this the abolition of the winter fuel payment as well, where elderly people won't turn the heating on, they will bounce into hospital, they won't be seen. Yesterday, and thank you for this, whoever did this, but they sent me a picture of all these ambulances queuing outside a hospital with patients inside, and they can't offload them because there is no capacity in the hospital. So those ambulances are out of action, so they can't then go and see anyone else who is very unwell, and we have a capacity crisis.
This is all about social care.
It is all about social care.
Of course, there's going to be a commission that's going to report in 2028. Louise Casey, I think, is fantastic. It's going to be very interesting what she comes up with. But how many commissions have we had? Or, well, not commissions, but, you know, inquiries into this have we had already? And isn't it pretty obvious what we need to do about social care? You know, I think a lot of us can see that, you know, a lot more resources need to be pumped into it. You know, it's about training more staff. It's about deciding what the cap is going to be that people have to contribute.
I think that's key.
All of that kind of stuff. We kind of know what the key issues are, and I really think this is not one of those issues that we bat away into the long grass for a commission.
And also, you know, is there a way we give tax breaks to people who then look after their relatives at home, for example? How do we support? And older people do much better when they're with people where they have company, where they're with their families, for example. How do we then promote, like in Spain, the extended family, which actually the Spanish are extremely good at?
Absolutely. I mean, what I want from Wes Streeting on this is leadership. I can see what he's trying to do, bring all the political parties together and get consensus so that we get some sort of long-term solution. But I'm afraid the problem is too urgent to wait until 2028.
I would agree. Let's look at the front page of the Sunday Mirror. Gio, I feared my career was over. This is the former Strictly star who believed that his career was over. He thought he would lose everything in the Strictly Come Dancing bullying row. They launched an investigation, this is the BBC, after Giovanni's dance partner, Amanda Abbington, quit Strictly and accused him of being abusive. So the probe upheld 6 of 17 complaints against Giovanni, but they did not find he had physically abused the Sherlock actress. He starts his appearance on Channel 4's Celebrity Hunted tonight with Strictly Pro Kai Wadrington, who is 29. The front page of The Sun. This is a really sad story. Prince William yesterday told of his shock at the death of a pal in the New Orleans terror attack. Will's shock at terror, death of pal. This is in New Orleans, of course. Edward Pettifer, who was just 31, died in that New Orleans attack, the stepson of Tiggy Legg Borg, who, if you remember, was the nanny to William and Harry. Do you remember that?
Yeah, the name definitely rings a bell. This is incredible, isn't it, what's happened in New Orleans, and also the guy that blew himself up in the Tesla car outside the Trump...
In the Cybertruck.
In Las Vegas. Just incredible. I was talking to a friend yesterday about this. What is it about? And both of these men had been in the armed forces or security services.
And also served in the same places as well.
Yes, absolutely. And, you know, what drives these kind of lone warriors, you know, I hesitate to use the word.
Well, he said it was a wake-up call to the world, didn't he? But obviously he was struggling with his mental health issues. He clearly had PTSD, and there's a duty of care when you come out of the armed forces.
I mean, I've been struggling to try and get into that mindset. Can you imagine getting into a vehicle and thinking, I'm now going to drive down a street and kill loads of people? I really struggle with it. I struggle to understand it, and also struggle to see how we can stop it and prevent people from doing it.
I would agree. And the same story is the front page of the Sunday People this morning. Will's sorrow at Brit terror death, which obviously is tragic for everyone concerned. This is my favourite story, though, of the day. The Daily Star, the age of the budgie smuggler is back. Yes. Well, I think this is tremendous news. Good news for fellows who like to prance around in Speedos. Dodgy budgie smugglers have been judged one of the sexiest things you can wear in 2025. Now, are you a fan of a budgie smuggler?
Yes.
Well, you're Spanish, so the answer is yes.
You've got to have the right body, haven't you? I think for this, that's the problem. I tend to go for, you know, something a bit not quite so small
body
tight. No, I haven't quite gone for the burkini yet. But so yeah, they look great on the right body. I think that's the issue.
So my family always take the mick because I am a wearer of budgie smugglers.
Oh, you are?
Oh,
right.
Yes. I'm all in favour. As much flesh. Why? What's wrong with that? No, my producer Dean is saying it's just wrong. It's just so wrong.
Morally wrong.
It's morally repugnant, David. What are you thinking? So there you go. Apparently lusty lasses say squeezy does it. Yes, women adore a fella in skin-tight budgie smugglers. The teeny-weeny Aussie Speedos are in their top 5 sexiest looks. Apparently the suit is quite good and quite up there. But also, apparently, it was Daniel Craig walking out of the sea in the Bond film.
That was very memorable, wasn't it?
And ladies had hot flushes over that. So
that was right too.
Well, and that was the beginning of the budgie smuggler. So there you are. That's the top news this morning. If you are waking up, budgie smugglers are back in, and of course, less packing. They're tiny.
Well, they are, yes. I mean, you know, good for the environment, less material, you know, all of that.
Well, that's right. Your carbon footprint is much lower. Richard, thank you very much for the moment. Lots more still to come. I'm asking this morning, Keir Starmer, front page of the Mail, saying that Starmer's time is limited as Prime Minister. Who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. After the break, we'll take you through more of this morning's front pages, and Richard has picked out some choice stories. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 7 o'clock on Sunday, January the 5th. I'm David Bull. This is Weekend Breakfast. Very good morning to you. Thank you very much for your company. Now, it is cold and rainy and miserable and snowy and slushy outside, so you are better off watching a Talk. I have great news for you this morning, as you would expect. Yes, that's right. It's National Bird Day today, a day dedicated to showing love and protection of our feathered friends. It's actually a time to raise awareness of the challenges that birds face globally and to encourage actions to safeguard them. Oh, that is a bird. Oh, it is a bird, yeah. Also, I say, it's whipped cream day today. Today gives you the perfect excuse to indulge. The earliest known evidence of whipped cream actually appears in a recipe from 1549. Italian Renaissance cook Cristoforo di Mezzobugo, he actually listed whipped cream as an ingredient in one of his recipes. Yum! Cream horn, anyone? Also, happy birthday to Bradley Cooper. Apparently, he's one of the highest paid actors, and also he was crowned sexiest man alive by People magazine in 2011. He turns 50 today. What a youngster. Happy birthday!
To you.
Yeah.
Happy birthday, dear. Happy birthday to you. Ding pong.
Ping pong. Let's start today's show, shall we?
Today's fascinating facts.
So in this hour, I have some new ones for you. On this day in 1066, the death of Edward the Confessor, usually considered the last king of the House of Wessex. He was called the Confessor because of his great piety. He died childless, sparking a succession crisis that led to the Norman conquest. On this day in 1971, one-day cricket was born. When 46,000 people turned up to watch England play Australia at Melbourne, the test match had been rained off for several days previously, and Australia won by 5 wickets. Well, there's a surprise. With 42 balls remaining. And then in 1981, Peter Sutcliffe, a 35-year-old lorry driver from Bradford, suspected of carrying out 13 murders across West Yorkshire over a period of 5 years, was formally charged in court. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Wake up, it's a brand new day. David and Richard leading the way. Stories so big, we just gotta know. With a smile on our faces, we let the joy flow.
We like the jolly flow. You've got a name check there. Did you hear that?
Yes.
Yes, there you are. A very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for your company. Weekend Breakfast. David Bull here with Richard Blanco, broadcaster and host of the House Hunters International. If you are waking up, tons of news around this morning. Let's start with the Sunday Times. This is a really sobering story, actually. NATO warns the UK over ballistic missile threats. There's been a lot of talk about how much money we are spending on of GDP on defence. We're spending about 2.3%. We've had a huge number of notable figures saying it's just not enough. We need to increase our GDP spending. Now, obviously, the government has the Strategic Defence Review, which is underway, but it reports far too late for many people. There are some very sobering things here. Royal naval warships risk being struck by advanced ballistic missiles donated by Iran or Russia. Our military bases overseas, particularly in Cyprus and Akrotiri, at threat. Militant groups in war-torn Middle Eastern countries such as Libya could strike London if they acquire long-range missiles. And senior defence sources are warning the UK is in peril now. Within 15 years, a ballistic missile will be able to hit Britain from anywhere in the world. This is very sobering, Richard.
It is. It says here the UK has no land-based air defences to protect critical infrastructure or population centres from medium-range and long-range ballistic missiles. I mean, it's very sobering indeed.
It is. So that's front page of the Sunday Times. Also, this big story, Sunday Telegraph. Net zero drive will raise the cost of holidays. Yes, this is right. This is the policy that no one voted voted for, that we're obsessed with, where we have to get to net zero by 2030, even though we only emit 1% of global emissions, whilst China and India keep building power stations. And so essentially a new net zero flight tax on airlines risks adding hundreds of pounds to family holidays. Why? Well, this is the Sustainable Aviation Fuel mandate. So essentially 2% of the fuel now has to be sustainable. That rises to 10%, and then it rises to 20%, 22% by 2040. This is all part of the net zero madness which is being imposed by the government. And many people are saying this is green madness, socialist ideology ahead of the interest of the public. Lord McKinley, chairman of the Net Zero Scrutiny Group, says, go on holiday whilst you can. You know, words fail me, actually, in terms of net zero, because I do think we need to have a referendum to say to people, is this really the direction of travel you want to go in? You know, the packaging, the net zero, we're going to make people poorer, you have to have a heat pump. And people are saying, I don't want that.
Yeah, I mean, it is very nanny state, isn't it? And I'm thinking as well about all of those local schemes, low traffic networks that were brought in as well snuck in during COVID, really, when people didn't get a chance to get involved in the consultation. I think the timing of this is really bad. This is traditionally, or was traditionally, a time when we would be flicking through our holiday catalogues. Of course, I mean, now people look online.
Some people like a catalogue.
They do, yes. But, you know, this was absolutely the wrong moment to bring in this new tax.
I totally agree. Big story in the Mail this morning as well. Let me just see if I can find that. But essentially, here it is. Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. Many people rejoicing at that thought. But the copy on this says he will be ousted as Prime Minister within a year. Furious voters attacking his poor handling of the economy, the NHS, immigration, the cost of living crisis. More than two-thirds, 68%, saying he's doing badly just in 6 months into this job. This is going to make nice reading for Nigel Farage. 1 in 5 voters say that Nigel Farage is the next Prime Minister.
Yeah, and we've seen that, it would appear that Labour is vulnerable to reform in something like 80 seats. It's whether or not they can break through the first-past-the-post electoral system, of course.
It is. This is a Delta poll, a survey. 69% think the country is heading in the wrong direction. 33% they're worried about the economy. 14% said they're anxious about high taxes and their families. 15% concerned about immigration. I actually think it's far higher than that. But that got me thinking, who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Is it Starmer himself, his lack of kind of reasonable thinking or listening to the public? Is it Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner? Is it the Conservative Party, the rise of the Conservative Party under Kemi Badenoch? Can she turn that around? Is it Nigel Farage? Or is it external sources? Is it Donald Trump? Is it actually Elon Musk, who has piled in? I think yesterday I was watching, he tweeted 5 times. He even retweeted Rupert Lowe, a Reform Member of Parliament. This is unprecedented for the richest man in the world to get involved in UK domestic politics in this way.
It's true, and it's going to be very interesting to see how the government handles this, really, because it, of course it wants to get on well with the Trump administration, and it's concerned about the possibility of tariffs. And you've got Peter Mandelson, who's the new ambassador in Washington, who's kind of working behind the scenes on this. But what do you do when, another government is criticising...
well, not even the government. I mean, he's sort of associated with the US administration, but, as head of DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency. But yeah, you're right.
Well, how do you respond to that? Because you want to be on good terms with them. And it's kind of completely inappropriate as well for Musk and Trump to be criticising the UK government. I think... normally people would be a bit more diplomatic, wouldn't they? Or there would be diplomatic channels, particularly because there's supposed to be a special relationship.
But remember, Obama got involved over the referendum, didn't he? He basically said that would be a big mistake. So there is precedent for this.
But that's the only thing he did.
That is the only
We're having
thing.
This tirade at the moment from Musk, brackets Trump, on various issues.
Let me ask you again, who do you think is or actually, what do you think is the biggest threat to Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X as well. You can leave a voice note. Really keen to hear from you. Actually, the front page of the Sunday Express is pertinent now. In the bleak midwinter, I have some breaking news for you. Liverpool and Manchester airport runways are now closed due to heavy snow. So do check, please, before you go to the airport. Liverpool and Manchester airport runways closed due to heavy snow. Just going back to the reform thing, and you mentioned a really important point here, which is about first past the post. This is in the Telegraph this morning. Reform UK is 6 points away from becoming the biggest party in Parliament, according to this election predictor. It says Nigel Farage's Insurgent Party could leapfrog both the Conservatives and Labour by gaining a few more percentage points of support, according to electoral calculus. If it reaches 28% of the popular vote at an election, it would likely become the largest force in the House of Commons, though short of an overall majority.
Yeah, I mean, with this sort of stuff, I look at what happened to the Labour Party and the rise of the Labour Party. They had their first time in government in 1924. It was another 23 years, was it, or so? No, 21 years before they actually got into government. So I doubt very much that this kind of change can happen so quickly.
Do you?
I do.
But I think we're in such unprecedented times that the tribalism of British politics is from another era.
Right.
I may be wrong, but I get the sense there is much more drift, and particularly amongst young people who you'd expect young people to be tribally Labour, because you're at your most anarchic and you're most likely to be Labour. And then as you get older, you tend to drift towards the right. What we're now seeing is this rise of young people voting for reform as first-time voters. Now, there is something driving this. Now, is that the immigration issue? Is it economy? Is it actually feeling that we have no control over our own borders or sovereignty or whatever it is? I don't know what it is. But I know there are some very disaffected people out there.
But that support can also be very fickle. I mean, look at what happened to the Lib Dems in 2010, and they were kind of, obliterated in 2015. And then, of course, we've seen the rise of the Lib Dems again in the last election. But, they've never got into power, really. Well, they shared power with the Conservatives for 5 years, and that, as we saw, was a disaster.
So the concern, you've got to be... I mean, what's interesting is that you've got Dame Andrea Jenkins, who's gone across to Reform UK. You've also now got Marco Longhi, the former Conservative MP, going to Reform. Is there a problem for Reform if they're seen as a dumping ground for failed Conservative MPs?
Or disaffected Conservative MPs as well, yes. That is a problem, and I think Nigel Farage is trying his best to kind of PR his way through that. He made the important point this weekend that he's been very careful not to get kind of ex-BNP people or people with BNP leanings into the Reform Party. I
mean, he's been really, really outspoken about Tommy Robinson, for example, and I know many of our viewers and listeners think that Reform should welcome Tommy Robinson into the party. Nigel Farage has ruled that out.
Yeah, he's a very talented operator, isn't he? He watch this space, I guess. It's going to be very interesting as well to see if he manages to get funding from Elon Musk, which, was rumoured.
Absolutely right. One of the other things that I just think smacks of ideology, and we've spoken about it a great deal, is the attack on private schools. Again, this is not thought through. So when you look at the sheer numbers, 500,000 kids in private schools, independent schools, saving the Exchequer £4.5 billion. Now, the government says they're going to levy 20% VAT on those private schools, which brings in about 1.5 billion. Yeah. But they haven't actually worked out how many kids are going to leave the independent sector, where are they going, and how are they going to accommodate them. Now, private schools are saying they're going to sell off sports fields. This is in the Telegraph this morning, because they can't afford to operate in the same way. And that's for lots of reasons, not just the VAT, but business rates. One of the other things I talked about yesterday was that actually these independent schools work and cohabit with state schools. So the kids from state schools can use the swimming pool, they can go and use the sports facilities. All that will stop.
Well, I think we need to see more of that, more of the sharing of facilities.
I would agree.
I think this has been a bit overstated, actually, because don't forget that if you have to pay VAT, you can also reclaim it on stuff that you buy. And also, you can go back 10 years on any capital purchases. So any investment that private schools have made over the last 10 years, they can reclaim. And, you know, the government...
So do you think the government's going to end up in a position where actually the schools are reclaiming more than they're paying in the VAT? Because I wonder whether they've actually thought this through.
Well, I agree. What I would like to see is a ring fencing of any additional monies that they get from this. They say they want to bring in, I think it's 6,500 new teachers. I'm very concerned about where they're going to come from because, as we know, you know, there's a shortage of teachers in things like maths and sciences and so on. So the idea that we just suddenly employ more teachers, more GPs, more nurses, but we've got to train them, you know, and that's a long-term problem.
And your point is really valid. There is no ring fencing, and they've admitted there is no ring fencing. I think many people would agree that as long as you can see that money going into the state sector, fine, but it's not. It's just going to disappear into the ether of increased pay rises for public sector workers and so on. But I think they haven't thought this through. And also there's another story doing the rounds in the Times saying that actually those private schools now are in such competition with each other, and we know that many private schools will close as a result of this. So the ones with the deepest pockets, and I'm talking about the Harrows, the Eatons and so on, they're now building even bigger facilities to attract pupils to their schools. And most people, you know, I don't think the government understands that the majority of private schools are not enormous. The average size is 200, 300 students.
I think you're right. The smaller private schools are going to really suffer with this. It's the larger ones that, of course, have invested and will be able to reclaim the VAT on that capital investment and so on. So they're going to be set up to benefit in many ways from this.
I would agree. Let's take a call. Abdul is in Ilford. Good morning to you.
Hi, David. You okay?
Yeah, good, thank you. So I'm asking this morning, who do you think is the biggest threat to Starmer, or who or what is the biggest threat to Starmer?
I think Starmer's a threat to Starmer. I think he should man up. I think, you know, the thing is, outside influence coming, you know, is affecting British politics. The problem we have here is that, you know, for decades now, there's outside entities which influence the outcome of British policies. For example, we have the Israeli lobby here, we have AIPAC in America, pulling the strings in the background. Trevor Chin, for example, bankrolled Starmer's campaign, election campaign. And Trevor Chin is also has links to the illegal settlements. They're financing the illegal settlements in the West Bank, for example. So this.
But how do you? But I take the point. But how do you divorce UK national interest? We are still a player on the global stage. You will always have external forces acting. What I haven't seen before is direct attacks by agencies like Elon Musk, for example, and Trump on an elected government in the United Kingdom. That's new to me.
Yeah, that's there. I appreciate it. But my point is, if we're going to take financial support from outside entities, what's going to happen?
Well, those political parties actually can't take. They're not allowed to take foreign money into a campaign fund. You can't do that. You have to be a UK taxpayer.
Yeah, but the thing is, David, it's no big secret that I'd say 80% of MPs have been bankrolled by the Israeli.
You can't say that. I have no data on that.
There is that. You look it up yourself. It's all.
Why do you think MPs are being bankrolled by Israel? Because they don't. They don't get bankrolled. That's not right.
Look at brother. I don't want to mention all the names, right? But I mean, if you look up how many MPs, especially Conservatives, you might as well call it Conservative Likud Party, because the manifestation of taking finance from Israel, the manifestation of that is in the
Abdul, there's no evidence of that. I'm sorry, there is no evidence of that at all, and I urge you to check your facts on that. That's Abdul there. Keep all your messages coming in, please. Good morning, David. This is Sean in Gloucester. Great show this morning. Thank you very much. I'm actually quite pleased that Starmer is in massive trouble. I hope it continues. The worse this despicable Labour lying government does, the higher chance of them being obliterated at the next election. Yes, we'll have to put up with the madness and the damage they do in the meantime, but it makes the case for reform ever stronger. It's interesting. I mean, obviously, I'm partisan, and I'm trying to be as objective as I can. I'm just reading out the messages.
Yes, I mean, lots of people frustrated with Keir Starmer, and I don't know how he's going to turn that around, actually, because, you know, trying to improve your popularity is one of the hardest things in politics, isn't it, really?
It is. Can I just ask you about this? And this is a story from a couple of days ago. A South London school has given pupils a 4-day week to improve their work-life balance. This is Liberty Woodland School in Morden. Apparently, children get a 3-day weekend to improve their mental health. Leanna Barrett, the head teacher and founder, said the extra time off was an opportunity for children to explore their passions. They charge £7,000 a year. They've got children between 4 and 16. I don't know how I feel about that.
I feel quite positive about this.
Do
I mean,
you?
I like the idea of a 4-day week with condensed hours. So, you know, you're probably doing as many hours, but across 4 days. And you
Why?
It's this idea of just having a bit more time and space. I mean, I remember when I went from doing a full-time job to becoming freelance. And, you know, I was very busy freelance for a while and was working 7 days a week. But, you know, when you've got a bit more space in the week,
but do children need
beneficial.
that? I mean, the one thing I do think is good is they're saying that the hours for kids need to be longer, and I would agree with that. It ties in also with the parents picking them up.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly when I was at school, you did have time for other stuff, whether it's sport and whatever it was. But I don't know about that. So how would that work if the kids are doing Monday to Thursday and the parents are working on the Friday?
That's going to be tricky, isn't it? Who's going to look after them on that day? Yes. I guess probably for teenagers, maybe, who, you know, don't need parental support throughout the day.
Have you met a teenager?
I'm just thinking, you know, on the top of my head.
Well, quite. Richard, thanks for the moment. Lots of messages coming in. This is Chris. Good morning, Doctor. Good morning to you, Chris. My son sends his daughter to a private school, and what they're doing is claiming back 10 years of VAT.
Oh.
That's interesting. The biggest threat to Starmer. Sharon Miller, one of our regulars. Good morning to you, Sharon. The biggest threat, that's what I'm asking. Who's the biggest threat to Starmer, or what is the biggest threat to Starmer? And there are many. 0344 499 1000. The biggest threat, says Sharon, to Starmer is the Reform Party, of course. Jennifer disagrees. I think it's a trio that is a threat and a headache to Starmer. Farage, Trump and Musk. Starmer must absolutely dread hearing their names. Great show, David. Thank you very much. Liz Fleming, good morning to you. Liz in sunny Bury St Edmunds, my neck of the woods. Good morning, David. Fabulous show as always, thank you. I look forward to the day that Nigel Farage and Reform become our government, and I think that day will be sooner rather than later. We were talking about prisons as well. This idea that you're going to let them into open prisons, even though they're more likely to abscond. Sue, good morning to you. What is wrong with politicians? Build more prisons, for goodness sake. Now, do it now, otherwise we will never do it. Absolute incompetence at its height. Stop building houses for so many immigrants and build more prisons. This is sobering from Michael. Good morning to you. We were talking earlier about heat pumps. Michael says, I'm 52, I'm disabled. I live in a one-bed flat with a heat pump. I'm having to spend £8.50 a day at the moment. I'm not cooking. I actually can't afford to cook. The only things on are my TV and my fridge, both of which are AA+ rated. Heat pumps don't work.
Yep, and the problem is, of course, they require electricity, and a lot of electricity, and that is expensive at the moment.
It is. So how do you reconcile that if you're in government, where you've got a 52-year-old disabled chap who cannot afford to cook? I mean, that's just outrageous.
Yeah, I mean, I really despair about what's happened with energy prices. We're at about 1760 or something like that a year is the average at the moment, and it was...
Of course, the energy price cap just gone up.
Yes, and it was 1,200 about 3 years ago, I think, and when it was 1,200, we thought, oh, my goodness, that's really high. And, you know, is there a prospect of energy prices coming down in the next few years?
No, because we're doing this net zero nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, also, we've seen the pipeline through Ukraine of Russian gas has been shut down now, so that's been factored into prices at the moment. But I just hope and pray that we will get back to a time when energy prices come down to that 1,200 point.
This is quite interesting. Lloyd, good morning to you. Lloyd says, good morning. Starmer will go after people on disability benefits next, and that will really finish him off. I love this one. Dan in Kent, good morning to you, one of our regulars. The biggest threat to Keir Starmer is Maggie Oliver. who I interviewed yesterday.
Right.
I think that has enormous resonance as well. Keep all of those coming in, please. Who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Message us on X as well. Time for a break. After the break, Davis Fang will be here with all the latest tech news. Can't wait for that. That's all still to come. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
One of those issues that matters to families up and down the country. I can't think of a family that hasn't, faced the issue of an elderly relative who needs care or who's worried about the potentially needing care and impacting them and their families. And so you'd think for every politician this would be one of those things that they would want to go down in history as the person who solved it. Now, I think that West Streeting does want to do that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Morning, 7:30, Sunday, January the 5th. I'm asking this morning, who or what is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Is it the Conservative Party? Is it Reform? Is it West Streeting? Is it Angela Rayner? Is it the dissatisfied Labour voters? Is it Trump? Is it Musk? Obviously, a lot of forces against the Prime Minister. The question is, who or what is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. Those calls charged at the national rate. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. Message us on X as well. Very keen to get voice notes. Now, just to let you know about stuff that's coming up later on this morning, Peter Cardwell will join me. He's following me at 10 o'clock. He's going to be interviewing Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary Member of Parliament at 10 o'clock this morning. That will be interesting because, of course, tomorrow is when they unveil the new NHS app, their plans to get the waiting list down. Also, there are two big stories this morning saying patients should be able to choose between 5 hospitals. I question how patients will make that choice. Also, he says we need to can something like 1 million appointments if you've had elective surgery. I'd like to know what that is based on, what evidence that is based on. Peter is going to be talking to Wes Streeting at 10 o'clock. Then later on, some really good bookings at 10:55. He's going to be talking to Chris Philp, MP, Shadow Home Secretary. And then to round it up, he's going to be talking to Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK. That is at 11 o'clock. So 10 o'clock, Wes Streeting, 10:55, Chris Philp, and then 11 o'clock, Richard Tice. Lots of messages coming in. Starmer's biggest threat is his own ideology. That's Sean. Good morning. Starmer's lack of foresight into the dangers of immigration, net zero, and the lack of funds for the military. That's Sue. Good morning, David. Loads of you getting in touch talking about Elon Musk, also about Donald Trump. This is Sam in Lancashire. Good morning to you. Good morning, David. The biggest threat to Keir is Keir. He needs to take accountability for his behaviour and his actions. Good morning, David. This is Doug. Simple answer. Stop this net zero idiocy and concentrate on services and infrastructure, a point that Richard made earlier on as well. Let's do something different now. It's time for Tech Rundown.
Tech Rundown.
Davis Fang joins me this morning. Good morning.
Good morning, David. How are you?
Yeah, all right, thanks. You're looking very well.
Thank you.
Enjoying the new year?
It is not. I was waiting for snow this morning. I was looking outside my window.
It snowed.
Where is this? But it wasn't anywhere to be seen in my backyard.
Right. So. And of course, being Australian, you're very excited about having some snow.
I want to see some snow, but, you know, while we're talking about it, I'm not seeing it in my backyard.
Well,
so that's very disappointing.
I just told you airports are closing, there is snow coming, you know, we've got this 10-day chill.
I need visual evidence.
OK. Fair enough. Now, we've got to go to a break fairly soon, but Luke Littler, you know, obviously, he's terribly good at darts, and he's very young, and he's won, what, £500,000? Anyway, there's a really fascinating story. We've talked about the rise of AI, haven't we, a great deal, and the fact is, you've got to be really careful. I said, when you Google something, you now get that AI-generated thing at the top. I'm never sure if it's true.
Yes, and I think you should probably continue to question that, because it seems like that Apple Intelligence actually predicted the future this week, because on your phone, as well as on Google, if you've got an Apple Intelligence phone, it will summarize your notification. So, for example...
Hang on a minute, what's an Apple Intelligence phone?
So, anything that's an iPhone 15 Pro and newer, you'll get Apple Intelligence on your phone. So, these notification summaries are one of the main features. I personally quite like it. For example, if you're a part of a massive group chat, it will summarize the entire group chat into one easy to read notification.
Lazy boy.
But the thing is, sometimes it gets things wrong. For example, over here we can see that it's gotten a couple of BBC headlines very wrong indeed, and it actually predicted that Luke Littler will win his title before it actually happened.
He said he had won it before he'd actually played it.
Precisely, and the BBC is very, very dismayed about this. They're quite concerned about the misrepresentation of their stories, and they say that it's essential that Apple fixes this problem urgently, as this has happened multiple times. I believe last time it happened with Luigi Maggioni, suggesting that he had committed suicide, when obviously that wasn't true. The thing is, although Apple can take note of this, it's quite difficult actually to fix this problem.
Well, why don't they scrap it then if it's not true?
The problem is that they've put so much money into these AI features, and this is probably the headlining one, and it would be probably a great shame to a lot of the engineers.
Well, not only did they say Luke Littler had won, which he hadn't won, they then said Rafael Nadal was gay, which was news to him.
Yes. To be fair, it was separated by commas, so if you read it slowly...
What did it say in commas?
It was reporting multiple stories. So it was about Rafael Nadal, and then comma, something else, and then something else gay. But if you read it really quickly, you would think that he was gay.
I do quite like the idea of chat groups being summarised, because, you know, sometimes you get like 60 messages on a chat group.
So I think we can see the appeal of the feature, but obviously definitely take it with a lot of salt.
Well, Reporters Without Borders, also known as RSF, called on Apple to axe the AI-powered summaries. It says the automated production of false information attributed to a media outlet is a blow to the outlet's credibility. It's interesting, there's one other point to this, which is that apparently these AI summaries are unique to you.
Yes, so it's if you've got an Apple phone at the very least, it's all generated on the device itself. So instead of it being done in the cloud in somewhere far away, the AI capabilities are on the phone itself. So that does improve security somewhat.
What do you think of that? A tailored, personalised message?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a bit dystopian, isn't it? Because it's giving you news based on your, I suppose, browsing history and interests, and I find that a bit odd.
There's a lot of scope for feeling manipulated, isn't there, really, by stuff that's seriously targeted at you.
I think so. I think so. We'll pause just for the moment. Davis, I shall check which phone I have now because I want to know whether I have Apple Intelligence on my phone. We'll continue with Davis Fang after this break. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
7:39 Weekend Breakfast. We're in the middle of Tech Rundown with Davis Fang, who's telling us all the latest tech news. Let's talk about Apple, because I'm always nervous these things are listening.
Yeah, and it turns out that they probably are, because Apple has just agreed to a $95 million settlement to resolve a class action lawsuit sort of related to that. It's alleging that Siri, which is the voice assistant on iPhones, has inadvertently listened to conversations and also shared them without consent to third parties. So this is probably a concern that a lot of us have had, but don't worry, because there is a way to solve that probably. So the 95 million, if you're interested in getting a bit of that money, unfortunately is only limited to US users.
It's $20 each, isn't it? Or something?
Yeah, up to 5 devices. So that's up to $100, which isn't bad. But like, if you're like me and have bought 100 Apple devices between September 2014,
you're not getting $2,000.
He needs to get out more.
And the end of last year, yeah, I can't get like $2,000, unfortunately.
No.
But basically, the lawsuit suggests that Siri, once activated, so you can activate Siri using your voice by saying just Siri or hey Siri, and I've just activated 1 million devices probably, including my own. So it sends that little snippet into the cloud, and then there are some people who can listen to it and sort of assess what that sounds like for research purposes as such. And allegedly...
What is research purposes?
So that Apple can make it more accurate. And also the lawsuit alleges that this information, these little snippets were shared among third parties. And the thing is, it's quite easily triggered. Sometimes you can say different words, it can hear different sounds and be triggered as well. And those recordings were sent to those third parties.
I think it's appalling that this stuff has been shared with third parties without consent.
I agree.
Yeah.
But not only that, apparently, these contractors, the third parties, heard confidential medical information, they heard drug deals, couples having sex, and Siri was activated by someone opening their zipper.
Yeah, so this is unfortunately all possible, but you can luckily turn that trigger word off in the settings and just activate Siri when you want to.
How do I do that?
Just in your settings, under the Siri settings, there's a thing to turn that
You should work in an Apple store, you're very good.
I love to work in tech support. And if you do that, you can just trigger Siri by pressing a button, which is better for all, I think.
Now, going back to AI, let's talk about the Meta, obviously a huge company, Nick Clegg standing down, by the way, from Meta.
Yeah.
They have, I don't understand this story, but it's to do with bot profiles.
Yeah, so in 2023, Meta launched quite a big feature, which is called celebrity characters. Essentially, these were chatbots that looked like celebrities. For example, there was Tom Brady, Paris Hilton, Snoop Dogg, and also Charli D'Amelio, and they paid these celebrities millions and millions of dollars to create chatbots that looked like them. So essentially, if you were feeling really lonely, you could go on Facebook and chat to a bot version of these celebrities, and unsurprisingly perhaps, this wasn't particularly successful. I think this is Tom Brady's one that we're about to see, and the thing is, these platforms were made so that people could connect to real people. So why on earth would you want to chat to a computer pretending to be a celebrity?
Because you're lonely.
Obviously, this was a flop, and Meta has discontinued it. But don't worry, if you do still want to talk to a bot, you can use their new AI Studio feature, where you can create your own bot. So if you want to chat to an AI version of yourself, you can do that instead of celebrities.
Richard?
Well, very kind of chatting to yourself as an AI bot.
I already do that. I chat away in the supermarket to myself as it is.
Would I want to be looking... Do I have to see a picture of myself, or...?
I think you create the sort of look of your character.
Right, OK. I'm not sure if I'd want to do that. I must admit, I do think the whole thing about the AI bots of celebs is a bit kind of weird and creepy. It's a bit like, dare I say, kind of sex dolls or something like that, you know, just having sort of...
It's a little bit early for that, Richard. It's 7:43. I agree. I think that's very odd indeed. Let's talk about Tim Cook. It's fascinating, isn't it, how politics and technology transcend. So essentially, they're all then cozying up because they can see an incoming Trump presidency.
Yes.
And what has Tim Cook done?
Well, he's given Trump's inauguration $1 million. And this is angered...
Small change.
This has angered the left to quite a ridiculous amount, I would say, if you go on Twitter. So he's donated $1 million to Trump's inauguration fund, and this isn't, you know, an isolated incident, because a lot of tech leaders have been doing the same. Sam Altman, Jeff Bezos, Zuckerberg have all pledged $1 million. And this has made me think, do they just have a group chat together and they're like, how much should we give Trump? And they just settled on $1 million. That's a reasonable figure. But basically, this is from his personal funds, from Tim Cook's personal funds, not Apple itself. And this is quite a strategic thing, I would say. During Trump's first term, especially, Cook built a very special personal relationship, and especially seeing how much Trump is influencing TikTok's future, where he's literally just flip-flopped on his view on TikTok so that it might not indeed be banned. It really shows the special relationship that tech companies have with incoming presidents. And Apple as such, especially probably want to avoid the upcoming ban on Chinese, the tariffs on Chinese imports that Trump is imposing.
You say it's a special relationship. I think it's deeply worrying, that level
I am
of
very
lobbying.
uncomfortable
I am
about
too.
this. I mean, lobbying is one thing, but giving $1 million to an inauguration fund, I just think is a step
to
too
pursue
far.
your own political priorities.
Yeah, but it's not just tech companies. Toyota, Goldman Sachs, Bank of America have all contributed. So it's sort of like if everyone is doing it and you're the one company that's not, will you be disadvantaged?
Well, so you were talking about tariffs on Chinese manufacturers, which I think is a real prospect under Trump. What would that mean for all the cheap Chinese stuff we're buying, Chinese technology, do you think? Do you think it will just disappear?
Well, I think this would most significantly affect probably the Sheins, the Temus, the very low-end Chinese imports. However, as virtually all of our technology is built in China, as you know, including Apple products, I think we'll just see a massive increase in prices overall.
Wow. Davis, let's pause just briefly whilst we gain our breath. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
One of those issues that matters to families up and down the country. I can't think of a family that hasn't, faced the issue of an elderly relative who needs care or who's worried about the potentially needing care and impacting them and their families. And so you'd think for every politician this would be one of those things that they would want to go down in history as the person who solved it. And I think that West Streeting does want to do that.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back. 10 to 8, Sunday, January the 5th. Richard Blanco with me, Davis Fang here to tell us all the latest tech. Just a quick one. Pat in Chichester, good morning to you. Great show, David. Thank you, Pat. Good morning, David. Regarding the AI debate, this is one for you. Surely the Alexa smartphone must be AI, or how could she come up with the most obscure information instantly? I agree, Toad. You ask her something and she'll tell you something you don't really need to know.
Yeah, Amazon hasn't necessarily introduced AI yet to their mainstream devices, but it definitely is coming. It's a more basic version of the AI that's coming.
No, I love it when Alexa pipes up and she says, "Did you ask me to do this?" No, I didn't. I didn't. Go away. Stop waking up.
I do love ChatGPT. I mean, it's so sensible and balanced.
You're kidding.
Oh, wonderful.
You're kidding.
No, I like it. Don't you like it?
No, I don't.
Oh, it's great.
It's very good at rewording emails, I find. Like, if you want to type a really, you're really angry and you need to type, an email out to customer service or something, it can just put it in the most eloquent way.
Yes.
Buy a dictionary.
And also, there's an images version of ChatGPT, isn't it? Is it called Pixie?
Well,
or something like
you
that?
can't create images.
Yes.
Right. Stop. Let's move on. This is about what is going on for minors in Florida about social media. We've talked a great deal about the way that actually I do worry a lot about social media, the impact it's having on young people who are growing and developing, who have ego issues, or they're worried about their place in society and so on. What's going on in Florida?
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about social media bans for minors over the past few months. It happened in Australia. It's proposed here by Labour, I think, and it's actually happened in Florida as well. So they've implemented, effective 1st of January this year, that social media access for minors has been restricted. So children under 14 cannot use social media at all. Teens aged 14 to 15 can have accounts with parental or guardian consent. And the law basically focuses on children being restricted from infinite scrolling social media platforms, including Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And I think that, it's all fine and dandy to imagine a world where children don't have access to social media, because the mental health concerns definitely are there to some extent. Rather, the issue is enforcement. As we've seen in Australia, it is very, very difficult to enforce, and because, children are creative. They can find a lot of different ways to circumvent restrictions. They could go on their parents' phones, log into their accounts. And so how are you going to stop children from accessing social media? Are you going to ask for Face ID, for for a fingerprint or something every time you open Facebook? That's just not really realistic, is it?
I think there's also a very worrying story as well. This is about TikTok have been accused of knowing its video live streams encourage sexual conduct and exploit children whilst profiting from them.
Yeah, this very much follows on from that. So TikTok only allows people of 18 and over to live stream. Obviously, you don't want minors to be live streaming out to a world with full of predators. Unfortunately, that's what's been happening. So there's a lawsuit in Utah that alleges that TikTok is knowingly allows the exploitation of minors by allowing them to continue live streaming. But the thing is, this is very difficult to avoid, because how do you stop a child from taking their parents' phone, possibly, and then just streaming to the world using their TikTok account? And I mean,
these allegations are incredibly serious. The lawsuit claims TikTok Live creates a virtual strip club connecting minors to adult predators in real time. This is stated by the Utah Attorney General, Sean Reyes. And they also say the live stream feature is coupled with monetization, which fosters this environment of illegal acts.
That is possibly a little bit of a controversial take, because if you are live streaming off someone else's account, you're not necessarily getting monetary funds from that.
No, sure. But I think this is a very, very blurred line, isn't it? Of course, the debate about the role of TikTok and ByteDance will continue as well. Also, let's just talk, finally, shall we? We talked earlier about tariffs on China and so on. Chinese drones.
Yes, so if you've got a consumer drone in your house, or if you receive one for Christmas, 90% of them are from Chinese companies, namely DJI, who is the market leader. And it seems like that the US Commerce Department is considering new regulations which prohibit Chinese drones from being sold in the US. And this is all fine and dandy. You know, it's all great to imagine a world where the only drones that you could buy are US drones. But the problem is that there are no consumer US drones. There was one company called Skydio that operated in this market until last year, but they've pulled out. So basically what the Commerce Department in the US is doing is banning drones altogether. And I'm not sure that is a great idea.
Now, talk to me about unidentified aerial phenomenon. You know, we saw all these drones, didn't we, in the United States all coming together and coalescing. What's the gossip on that?
Well, what's the gossip? Well, there really isn't that much gossip, unfortunately. They might be just recreation drones flying about. And it's obviously very difficult to photograph a drone in the night sky, you know, with the tiny little light. So nobody really knows what it is.
I've only seen drones used for filming. What else are people using drones for? I mean, you can inspect roofs, can't you, to see if there's a problem and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's security risks that are the concern, especially when you've got Chinese drones, which may or may not be sending information back to the CCP indirectly. That's obviously a concern, but when there is no alternative from a homegrown company...
But then maybe they know stuff we don't. Maybe there is a real national security concern.
There definitely could be a risk, but at the same time, what are we going to ask photographers, videographers to purchase?
I think we'll cope. Thank you, Davis. Really good to see you as ever. That was today's Tech Rundown.
Tech Rundown.
Now, since Davis is here and he's a well-dressed, well-turned-out young man, I thought we should do your story from The Observer, page 20, which you chose earlier, which is obviously a very important story about deodorant.
Well, yes.
And what is the detail of said story?
It is, yes. It says here, it's the pits. Would you pay £35 for a designer deodorant? Once humble, bought for £1 and used with little pleasure, deodorant has done an about-face, where it used to be a simple case of misting armpits with Lynx or spritzing with Shaw. Yes. The world of deodorant has evolved to offer products that cost as much as fancy face serums and smell as good as fine scent. There's one that's called To My Ships, which costs £35. Don't know why it's called that.
Wow.
Another one, Malin and Gertz, I think that says proffers Bergamot as part of its £22 BO busting offering. So there you go, posh deodorant.
So would you pay £35 for a posh deodorant?
Sure I would, actually.
You're not sure you
I tend to go with my Nivea one, you know.
Nivea?
Nivea,
I remember the days of Lynx spraying that on Africa or whatever else it was. You look like a man who would spend £35 on deodorant.
Quite possibly not. I've seen that there's been this massive rise of natural deodorants, which I don't believe work that well. And a lot of them do cost around £35.
I've known people use lemons and things like that instead of deodorant, but
doesn't that sting?
Probably. I don't think it works. That's the main issue.
Stain your white shirt as well.
What's that? Sorry. And yes, what does it do to your clothes?
Yeah.
Very good point.
Terrible.
I play tennis a lot, so I'm very conscious of people's, deodorant use, and it's vital when you're doing sports.
well, that is very true indeed. We'll leave that there and draw a line under that. Thank you for the moment. I'm asking this morning, who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also message us on X at talkTV. Very keen to get voice notes on this as well. So I've just been thinking, who is it? Is it Streeting? Is it Rayner? Is it Musk? Is it Trump? Is it Farage? Is it... What is actually the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Do let me know. Our time is up, gentlemen, I'm afraid. Not my time, but your time. Your time is up. That sounds terrible. Richard, thank you ever so much for coming in this morning.
My pleasure. It's been fabulous. I've really enjoyed it. Lovely.
And you are playing tennis later?
I am, yes. Playing indoors, I think, given the weather.
I don't blame you at all. Thank you ever so much for coming in. Really good to see you this morning. Thank you, Mr. Fang. Always good to see you as well. Keep your comments coming in, please. Who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Now, after the break, we're going to be talking about this new health initiative from the Labour Party. We'll talk about the role of the NHS rolling that out. James Heal, the political correspondent for The Spectator, will join me after this break. This is Weekend Breakfast.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. It's just after 8 o'clock on Sunday, January the 5th. I'm David Bull, and this is Weekend Breakfast. Thank you for your company this morning. Great news for you this morning. It's National Bird Day today. That's right, a day dedicated to showing love and protection of our feathered friends. It's a time to raise awareness of the challenges that birds face globally and to encourage actions to safeguard them. Now, much more interestingly, it's Whipped Cream Day today. I say. Today gives you the perfect excuse to indulge. In fact, the earliest known evidence of whipped cream appears in a recipe from 1549. That's right, Italian Renaissance cook Cristoforo di Mezzofugo listed whipped cream in his ingredients for one of his recipes. Yum, yum, yum. Yeah, and happy birthday to Bradley Cooper. He's one of the highest paid actors, actually. He was crowned Sexiest Man Alive by People magazine. That was in 2011. He's a baby. He turns 50 today. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you.
Oh, where's the ding-dong? No ding-dong. No ding-dong. Oh, what a shame. Let's move on to today's fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Very sad about the no ding-dong thing. Right, on this day in 1922, Sir Ernest Shackleton, British Antarctic explorer, died of a heart attack off South Georgia. At his wife's request, he was buried there. It was his fourth expedition aimed at circumnavigating the Antarctic in what he described as the one remaining object of Antarctic journeying, the crossing of the continent from sea to sea via the pole. Also, on this day in 1960, the last journey of the Mumbles Railway, the oldest in the world. It was set up in 1804 as a goods railway, running from Swansea to Mumbles Head in Wales. Began carrying passengers in 1807. It holds the record, apparently, for the highest number of forms of traction of any railway in the world. Horse-drawn sail power, steam power, electric power, petrol or diesel. And on this day, and you'll remember this actually, in 2021, Scots were ordered to stay at home and work from home where possible because of COVID-19 lockdown, which saw schools closed to most pupils until the 1st of February. Also, a new lockdown in England saw schools and colleges closed to most pupils and a switch to remote working. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Weekend breakfast, can't start it the wrong way. The David Bull Show, your bright Sunday.
Very good, Dave. Thanks ever so much. Good morning. Good morning. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm David Bull. Lots more still to come. We've got our Future Politics panel coming up. Nathan Robbins, apprentice mechanic. We've also got Aditya Dattatreya, who's a broadcast journalist student at City University, joining me. That's at 8:20. Then we've got a Sunday surgery today about the future of AI. Davis was just talking about AI. How can it help us, actually, in managing those NHS waiting lists? Of course, tomorrow, the Prime Minister, Wes Streeting, are going to unveil their plan for the NHS about the NHS app. We'll talk a little more about that as well. Wes Streeting says we need to cut about 1 million appointments post-elective surgery, freeing up capacity in the NHS. A lot of talk about how we're going to do that. Also, front page of the Telegraph this morning saying Streeting rids the NHS of pointless checkouts, but we've also got in the Times this morning saying that people need to have a choice of hospitals that they go to. I question, how do people actually make that decision? Do you go closer to home? Do you go to a centre of expertise? They want to roll all of that out. Also, big stories in the press this morning. Net Zero Drive, you'll be thrilled to know your holiday price is going up by 300 quid. That is, of course, because we're moving to sustainable aviation fuel, whether you like it or not, even though the UK only contributes 1% of global emissions. That is the front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Let me just find this one. This is the Sunday Times. A very distressing story, actually, about NATO warning the UK over ballistic missile threats, essentially saying we haven't taken defence seriously in this country. We spend 2.3% of GDP on defence. Many people are saying that actually this is the massive wake-up call because we are not spending enough money on traditional forces, but also we haven't looked ahead at the threat of ballistic missiles. The fact is they travel at 4,300 miles. London could be struck from anywhere in the world in just 15 years' time, if not sooner. And it's a time for us to wake up. Then the front page of the Mail, and this is the question this morning. The Mail: Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year, according to a new poll. So Keir Starmer will be ousted as Prime Minister within a year, according to this poll from the Mail on Sunday. Voters attacking his poor handling of the economy, the NHS, immigration, and the cost of living crisis as well. Those are all the big top stories this morning. Let's move on, though, and talk about the NHS, as I was saying. The government believes that the future of the NHS can be protected using an NHS app. We shall see. Joining me now, James Heal, political correspondent at The Spectator. Good morning, James.
Morning, David.
So should we talk about this? It's been embargoed, this story. It was sitting on my desk yesterday. This is going to be unveiled tomorrow. Essentially, it is headline: Power to the Patient, as the government sets out plans to cut waiting lists. Their big idea, right, is to have an upgraded NHS app so you can choose provider, you can book your appointment, you can receive your test results. They say this is part of the elective reform plan to cut waiting lists, and they talk about raising minimum standards. Your reading of this, is this the golden nugget, the golden bullet?
Well, this shows to me that Labour is putting all its eggs in the kind of NHS reform basket. The big winner of the last budget was the NHS and Department for Health, 22 billion in tax rises for the NHS. And so this is basically Wes Streeting trying to deliver. We've had the first 6 months, him talking about what he's going to do in office. This is him actually saying what's going to happen on the ground. And so I think the problem with NHS reform, as you'll know, David, of course, is it takes a huge long time to actually get off the ground. What he's doing is sending a message right now. He's talking about the fact that legally, of course, patients are supposed to have a choice of different hospital they can go to. They're currently not making the most of that. So he's trying to use the kind of bully pulpit of his office to try and shake them out of the kind of collective stupor and try and actually get a good deal for patients.
That is all very well and good, but actually, if this is their great panacea, which is to roll out an app, my worry about this is that actually what it does, it's prejudicial against older people who may not be able to use that kind of technology. These people like to phone up, they like to talk to a person, they want to write it down in a diary. I'm deeply nervous that, as you say, putting all their eggs in one basket around an app saying choose, well, essentially it's choose and book, isn't it?
Well, that will be the big criticism of them. I mean, Wes Streeting would counter that by saying, you know, more people use NHS apps than Netflix, for instance. Obviously, it shows a huge...
Well, you had to, James. You were forced to do it.
Fair point. I take that point. I think, yeah, that's going to be the big criticism. And, of course, you know, the other hand, the other thing, of course, is getting an appointment. So it's all very well saying about actually freeing up the app. The key thing, of course, is how many people you're going to get into the system. And I think the problem for them is that how quickly is the investment going to come into line? Because often the danger is that the NHS swallows up the money and actually won't improve on the services they're delivering.
Well, they say that under this app, you can view and manage your appointments. You can choose from a wide range of providers, which I'll talk about in a minute. I can book diagnostic tests through community diagnostic centres. Look, I broadly welcome it. I actually think it's a good idea, and you get your test results delivered back to you. But in terms of reform generally, this isn't going to cut the mustard.
No, I won't. And I think that people are now saying within the Labour Party, I mean, you were talking there about sort of what's the threat to Keir Starmer. I think there's a danger about threat to Wes Streeting. You know, what's he going to actually deliver on in terms of had a lot of money, he has a lot of praise, etc. Is this going to actually lead to improvements on the ground? The other thing I think people are talking about is, you know, the NHS workforce plan of Rishi Sunak wasn't by any means a panacea to the issues in the NHS, but people thought it's a plan, at least we can work with it. The danger for Labour is they want to consult on everything, and you do get the risk of paralysis by analysis. You get too much commissions, too many reviews. Social care has been pushed back to 2028. When are we actually going to see the pleasures get into the plan at the moment?
Well, of course, we saw Ara Darzi, who I used to work for, Ara's report into this saying the NHS is in a critical condition. The NHS must reform or die. It must move. This very sort of trendy phrase, it needs to move from analogue to digital. Yet again, Streeting bandies that around. I don't really know what that means. It talks about the focus must be on preventing disease as well. There also smacks of a class war to me. It says if the wealthy can choose where and when they're treated, then working class patients should be able to as well. And the government will give them that choice. I would counter that by saying if you are confronted as a patient, and I have been in this position where you say to the patient, where would you like to be treated? What do they base that on?
That is going to be the key question in terms of the criteria, and I suspect we'll see a bit more of that when the Prime Minister gives his big speech tomorrow. As you say, how informed are the patients going to be? It's very well sort of offering a theoretical choice, but what is actually on the ground? I think it's kind of striking that Wes Streeting, when he talks about this, is wording it very much his own experience. He talks about when he had cancer diagnosis in 2021. He went to the Royal Free Hospital, for instance. He talks about having a good experience, but, you know, plenty of people will also counter that by saying, will the patient really be the best place to judge that? And the danger is, of course, you then have disproportionate outcomes, etc., and a postcode lottery. And so you can see other Labour MPs standing up and saying, hang on a sec, that doesn't really solve the issue. It's simply relocated resources elsewhere in the system.
And actually what we need to do is to work to a system where all hospitals provide exemplary treatment. So if you say to a patient, OK, so let's take that example of a kidney cancer. Do you want to go to your local DGH, which is down the road, or do you want to go to a centre of excellence in London? I mean, it's an impossible question for people to answer, and actually what they want is advice from the clinician to say, in my humble opinion, you would be better treated here because of X.
Absolutely right. And so I think that's going to be the big question, is that fine, you offer people a theoretical choice. The other thing, of course, they just want to see actual improvement in their standards and getting the appointment in the first place. It doesn't matter where it is. They just want to get something in the diary, as it were.
And just in terms of that, I mean, this is their big plan. So we've got an app. We've got you can choose whatever you want. But also, let's just talk about this other big story this morning, which is in the Telegraph. Wes Streeting says he will scrap 1 million appointments. These are post-elective surgery appointments. Now, look, when you have an elective operation, i.e. a planned operation, it is vital to understand how you've done at the end of that operation. I just find this odd that Wes Streeting, who is not a clinician, can say we're going to stop 1 million appointments. It really should be, I mean, what he's saying is we're going to rely on technology and trackers and all the rest of it. But again, isn't this a gimmick?
I think that's the risk for Labour, because they're saying about technology, etc. We've been talking about technology in the NHS. I remember when Matt Hancock used to talk about how many pages and fax machines there were in the NHS. Actually, of course, you know, people often will need that kind of face-to-face appointment. They'll need the kind of things you're talking about in the kind of post-elective treatment. And so I think with the Wes Streeting, the danger is that he sometimes takes a bit of a relish in sort of annoying the clinicians, the people who are sort of medical practitioners, etc. The danger is, of course, if that turns against them and there's sort of some of the criticism that come out of them, it actually has some merit to it.
Could we just talk about this, if I may? The Mail, the front page of the Mail, you will have seen this. Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. I mean, this is absolutely fascinating. When you read the copy, this is a big poll for the Mail on Sunday. Furious voters attacking his poor handling of the economy, the NHS, immigration, the cost of living crisis. They expect the Labour leader to last another year at most. 2/3 say he is doing badly. And your thoughts on that? I mean, this is going to make very sobering reading for him.
It will, certainly. And I think, for me, the telling thing from 2024 was talking to a veteran of the 1997 and 2024 Labour conferences and just comparing the striking difference in attitude. 1997, Blair just got in, had won a big landslide, similar levels to Starmer a few months ago, really triumphant, we're the masters now. 2024, it was very, very different. If you were very moody, downbeat, glum, backbiting, etc. And I think the problem for Starmer is, yes, he's not going anywhere for the next 4 years in terms of having a parliamentary majority to rely on, but the danger is his authority has been eroded. And in 12 months' time, if these improvement hasn't been markedly seen in the NHS and other areas than communications, for instance, which he has some control over, people, I think, will suddenly, that sort of whispers of criticism are going to turn into a crescendo and could prove real issues for his authority and actually getting the Labour Party in shape if they look like they're going to lose a load of seats next time around.
Can I ask you the question that actually I've been asking all morning?
Sure.
Who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Labour? Is it his own side? Is it Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner? Is it the new Labour MPs? Very worried about whether they will stay in their job. Is it Nigel Farage, the role of reform? Could it be a resurgent Conservative Party? Is it the noise is off? Is it Donald Trump? Is it Elon Musk? In your opinion, who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Starmer? Or is it himself?
It's probably himself. But the second to that, I mentioned someone you haven't mentioned, which is Donald Trump. And if Trump proves to be a very difficult, awkward partner, puts the tariffs up, and we have a recession, I think that's going to be the single biggest factor of the next 12 months or so. Longer term, I think it's probably Nigel Farage.
That's fascinating. And in terms of Elon Musk, I counted yesterday, he tweeted 6 times about British domestic politics in the space of an hour.
I mean, he is obsessed with the UK. I think he very much sees it as a playground for his influence. Labour have this policy of don't engage, don't give it oxygen, etc. I wonder how long that's going to hold. The key question, of course, David, is what happens after Jan 20th, because Labour people are saying, look, he's fine, he's tweeting now, he's in opposition, not in office yet, but if he's holding a major cabinet post, Department of Government Efficiency, and he's tweeting like this, he's running his own foreign policy, that cannot continue. And so the big thing that happens is 15 days' time, is that going to change or not?
And you mentioned Nigel Farage there and reform, 170,000 members now. Of course, we've spoken before about Kemi Badenoch's terrible decision to attack that as an automated response. We know that is linked to Nation Builder, which is where you subscribe. If you look at the sheer numbers joining reform, and if they're all paying 25 quid, that means reform has quite a significant war chest. And of course, now we're in a position, and there's another big story this morning saying, and here it is, reform, this is in the Telegraph, UK is 6 points away from becoming the biggest party in Parliament. His insurgent party could leapfrog the Conservatives and Labour by gaining a few more percentage points of support. This is the most interesting thing about the pivotal moment in the first past the post system, because Reform UK, 4 million votes, 5 MPs, but suddenly the mass changes, doesn't it? Because you reach this tipping point where suddenly, as you add in more voters, their vote share skyrockets.
Absolutely, and if you get a result like you had in Thurrock, where James McMurdoch was elected MP, he won with just 31% of the vote. We are increasingly moving to a system where you can win a plurality of the seats, dozens and dozens and scores and hundreds even of seats, with a very little amount of the vote. So Labour won, of course, 415 or so seats with 32.7% of the vote. If we get to that point where suddenly first past the post goes from being a handicap to a help to reform, that's the big thing. And the other thing, of course, is in the Sunday Times, looking ahead to the local elections, people talk about 500-600 councillors. Nigel Farage, as you'll know, David, is following the Paddy Ashdown model. You build up the local association, you build up councillors, and then you go for the national next time, the parliamentary constituency. So that's going to be a huge handicap for Kemi Badenoch, I think, when it comes to 4 months' time.
James, always good to talk to you. Thank you ever so much for your time this morning. James Hill, political correspondent for The Spectator. Keep all of your messages coming in. I'm asking this morning, who or what is the biggest threat to Starmer? It's quite interesting. James said it's Starmer, followed by Farage. People power, according to Chris Patrick, good morning to you. People power is the biggest threat to Starmer, plus a good leader like Farage. Starmer will be ousted after the local council elections in May, I predict. 2025 will see many defectors from both major parties going to reform with by-elections across the UK. Emma, good morning to you in Gloucester. Harmer Starmer's biggest threat is himself. Tim in Southampton, virtually every member of the London Cabinet and the London Mayor have at some point engaged in the character assassination of Trump. So what is the big deal with Musk criticising Starmer and his front bench? Well, let me tell you, they don't like it very much. Keep all of those messages coming in, please. Who or what is the biggest threat to Starmer? The number 0344 499 1000. Calls charged at the national rate. In a few minutes' time, I'm going to be joined by Aditya Dattatreya, who's a broadcast journalist, student at the City University. Also Nathan Robbins, who's an apprentice mechanic. They're going to be here talking about all the latest issues in the world. That is in our Future Politics panel. Don't go anywhere. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
You buy into our system, you buy into our values, our culture, our fantastic liberal approach to life, and you accept what it means to be British.
So does that mean then? Does that mean? Okay, fine.
There should be.
Fine, hang on a second. I need to ask you. So, if that is the case, does that mean that, for example, anybody of, say, black Afro-Caribbean background, does that mean that people cannot or should not be referred to it? I mean, for example, should we be even naming tube lines the Windrush line?
No, I don't think we should. I think everyone should be treated equally.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Weekend Breakfast, 8:23, Sunday, January the 5th. I'm David Bull. Thank you for your company. Loads of messages coming in. So, I'm asking this morning, who or what do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Now, is it Keir Starmer himself? Is it Angela Rayner? Is it Wes Streeting? Is it infighting? Is it the new Labour MPs who are deeply worried about the future of direction of their party? Is it, as James Heal said, it's Starmer himself is the biggest threat to Starmer? Is it Nigel Farage, the rise of reform? Is it Kemi Badenoch? Is she going to be the biggest threat? Is it Elon Musk? Is it Donald Trump? The number 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can message us on X as well at talkTV. Loads of you getting in touch about that with your ideas about how long Starmer has got as well. Let's move on. It's time now for the Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, joining me this morning, I'm delighted to say Aditya Dattatreya, who's a broadcast journalist student at City University, and also joining him for the first time, Nathan Robbins, who's an apprentice mechanic. Good morning to the two of you. Good morning. Morning. Good morning. Now, let's start with you, Nathan. You're new to the panel. Obviously, we've met before. Just tell us a little bit. You're an apprentice mechanic. Well, that's brilliant.
Apprentice mechanic, member of Reform UK as well. I've got involved with the party at the beginning of this year when the general election was called. It sort of just led from there. Something that I'm passionate about and something that I think we've got a chance to make a real difference and make a change.
And just tell people how old you are.
I'm 18.
18. And why... So we were talking about this earlier, young people, and particularly we're seeing a huge number of young people joining Reform UK. What was it about that? Because you're meant to be at your most ideological, you're meant to be at your most rebellious at 18. Why did you choose... what people call a right-wing party, but I would call right of centre?
Yeah, I wouldn't call it right-wing, but I chose it because they have values that I think matter to everybody in the country. And I think family, community and country are three values that everybody can relate to. And I chose it because we're witnessing a demise of just respect in the community. People, I think, have got a lack of respect for themselves as well as a lack of respect for the country and community.
Right, Aditya, just in terms of the Labour government, because I believe you're a Labour supporter, is that correct?
Well, I would
or a
say,
floating voter?
Yes, I am completely a floating voter. My allegiances lie nowhere but good policy.
Good policy. So how do you view the future of the United Kingdom? We have a government currently that's been in place for 6 months. I'm saying this morning, based on this, the front page of the Mail, which you will have seen this morning, Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. I think it's fair to say it has been a disastrous start, whether it's the winter fuel allowance, whether it's attacking the farmers, whether it's attacking older people. They really have picked fights with everyone they possibly can in the quest for ideology, in my humble opinion.
Well, I'd have to agree with you, and I think that would be one of the byproducts of running a really generalized campaign. You know, throughout the election cycle and just after it, the term broad but shallow was thrown around a lot, right? Where the government is broad but shallow, where to garner the most number of votes possible, the government has not married themselves to any single ideology, right? apart from maybe growth, which was not really in any concrete ways defined as to how you're going to achieve that growth. Maybe it was done through, you know, a few of these unpopular policy choices in the opening few months of the government. But I think this is what happens when you try to be as vague and general as possible.
Well, so it's a brilliant point. They basically promised absolutely nothing, and the promises they did promise, they broke.
Yeah.
Didn't they?
Yep.
They said we're not going to increase tax, national insurance, VAT, and then probably increase employers' national insurance. That's a lie.
You know, I think some of what they also said, which was tax avoidance, right, and busting down on tax avoidance, hasn't happened yet. You talk about the broadest shoulders have to, what was the phrase they used? The broadest shoulders have to bear the most weight. Yes, the private school tax is a step in the positive direction.
Is it?
But that,
Is it?
I think so, yeah.
Why?
Well, I think the whole concept of private schools shouldn't exist because, you know, why is it that one select set of children just because they are from a more privileged background?
Are they? So that's interesting. Is he right? And also, I would counter that by asking, are they privileged people or are they families that have a different set of priorities?
I think, yeah, I wouldn't agree at all with that. I think they're people, some of the people that I know that go to private school, I wouldn't say they're particularly wealthy. I'd say they've got parents that have worked very hard to get their children to that point and have made a lot of sacrifices to get their children to that point. And I don't think it's right to say that they're privileged just because they've worked hard. I think that should be rewarded. The fact that they have worked hard, they've got their priorities right, they know that a good education is hopefully going to get their child into a good job and onto the property ladder and further in life, and I'd say that they've got their priorities right.
And just in terms of that, are you worried that actually, in terms of the way that this has been thought through, we know 500,000 kids save the country about 4.5 billion quid, because remember, they're already paying for state education. So what's going to happen? You'll have more kids, which we're already seeing, because parents now can't afford a 20% uplift going into the state system. I've heard from people in Dundee, for example, there are no schools. So where are these kids going?
Here's the thing. The wealthiest of, or the most prominent, I should use the operating word there, prominent, the most prominent private schools have said that they will not be passing on that cost to parents.
But you're talking about the most prominent, so you're talking about the Eatons, the Harrows, and so on, the Winchesters. The vast majority of independent schools are not those schools.
No,
they have fewer numbers of pupils, and also they actually have cheaper fees, but they're going to struggle. They're really going to struggle.
Granted, the revenue that they're getting is lower, but there's still a significant uptake from, you know, free public education, right? And I still think that if you have the means and you have that much extra resources, you know, it's your duty to pay up. And
is it?
Yes.
Nathan,
why should you, just because you've worked harder, why should you have to pay up? Why would you?
Well, here's what I'd say to that. It would be inappropriate to neglect the fact that there is a sense of privilege that goes into attending private school, right? At any level, when there is the free option of public school, when there is the option of equal education that everyone can get with a standardized syllabi, why is it that you're seeking out something that costs more?
Nathan?
Well, I'd say the quality of education in private schools has declined. We've got public schools. Sorry,
in state system.
In state system has declined. You've got classrooms that are overwhelmed. You've got teachers that have got too many students to cope with, and you're now going to put thousands more into the state sector when you could just leave the private sector alone.
Can I just put... Anna has just messaged in from Surrey. Good morning, Anna. Could you explain to your young delusional guest... I won't read that bit out. Oh, no, I did. I'm a lone parent. I worked a 70-hour week, 51 weeks of the year to educate my son in an independent school. I could have sat on my backside for 15 years instead. Is my son privileged? So she has done 51 weeks a year, sent her kid to private school because she believes that is her priority, instead of going off to Magaluf and having Sky TV or whatever else. Is she wrong?
No, she's not wrong. And as you pointed out correctly, the public school system, the state school system, is not doing well. And I think that the nearly...
Well, to be fair, actually, the literacy and numeracy has improved dramatically in state schools. But actually, if you are forcing, which I would say it is, by putting a 20% uplift on that, aren't you just pushing mediocrity?
I don't think so. I think, you know, you're just your broad figures, you're increasing the amount of revenue generated by these private schools by nearly £1.5 billion a year.
Who is?
The government is by increasing stripping the VAT exemption off of private schools. You're generating more than £1 billion in revenue, which should, in my opinion, be put back into the state school system to improve
and
it.
ring-fenced.
Well, yes. I mean, but by doing that, you're automatically, you know, if not paying more teachers, having more classrooms, which will make it easier to have those extra students that you've got via overflow of the private schools.
Do you think it will backfire?
I think it will backfire because I don't think the state schools will cope.
Why?
They're already overwhelmed.
And it sounds like the extra money would help.
Well, they say 6,500 teachers, but actually the maths don't work. They would have to raise far more money to employ those teachers. I have to break. I'm afraid you're doing a fantastic job. Both of you will continue with our future politics panel with Aditya and with Nathan after this break.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. This is Future Politics Panel. I'm in the middle of this with Aditya and with Nathan as well. Lots of messages coming in. Should we just talk about this big story in the Telegraph? Reform UK is just 6 points away from becoming the biggest party in Parliament. This is according to the election predictor. Nigel Farage's insurgent party could leapfrog both the Conservatives and Labour by gaining a few more percentage points of support. This is according to electoral calculus. Now, if the party reaches 28% of the popular vote, it would become the largest force in the House of Commons, though short of an overall majority. Where do you stand on this? Because I said we're now in a state of enormous flux. I have never seen this, because you normally have tribal voters who vote Labour all their life or Tory all their life or whatever. You've now got an insurgent party which has 170,000 members, helped by Kemi Badenoch, let me tell you, by saying it was automated. There's something very odd going on in British politics, isn't there?
Well, there's discontent in the political system as a whole, and I think, you know, that's a feature of declining declining poverty, declining revenue. People are poorer. They feel it.
Isn't it a disconnect with the government? The government actually is not in step with the people.
Yes, 100%. The government is not in step with the people. They're not in step with what the people want. And, this is, again, proved by the fact that a bunch of, Labour councillors have resigned.
Yeah, 20.
And it just goes to show that, and that's their local councillors. And local councillors, I think, are some of the people who are most in tune with what local community is and what it means. And for them to, quote a number of reasons but highlight the fundamental disconnect between the government and the people. And I think the rise of any other party comes along when there's, a lot of discontent with the political system.
And if you were to vote tomorrow, who would you vote for?
I'm not sure that that any one party really does stand out to me, but it just seems like everyone is more. They're doing one of two things. Either they're working really hard to polarize their voters into thinking this way is the only way and anything else is absolutely wrong, or they're going to die in the center where, nothing is getting done. They're trying to appeal to everyone, but they're not really doing anything.
That's really interesting. So, obviously, you are a voter for and a supporter of Reform UK. When you speak to other young people, what is driving, in terms of actually we're seeing an enormous change in British politics. I've never seen it in my life. Quite the mobility that we're seeing between all of these parties. What is it, in your view, having, as an 18-year-old, meeting other young people who are going to reform? I've never met such energised people, young people, who are engaged on all sides, for all parties, who are so engaged in politics. What's driving that?
I think there's a combination of different things. I think one of the things is we're listened to. I think that plays a big part, is that actually, if you've got young people that are saying these ideas, have got ideas, and you listen to them, more young people look at that and think, well, actually, Labour's not listening, Conservatives haven't listened for the last 14 years, let's go to Reform, let's be listened and let's be heard. And I think that is one of the biggest reasons that a lot of the young people are going to Reform.
And why do you think you feel listened to? What is it they do that the other parties could learn from?
I think social media plays a big part.
That's interesting.
I think you've got people, I'd say their MPs that they've got are more in touch with the general public. They're more, I'd say, there's people that you'd meet in the street and you just sit down and have a conversation with. They're common people, if you like.
I mean, the social media thing is absolutely fascinating, and I think the elections, and I think all the electoral parties could take a lesson out of that book. Should we just talk about this other great story this morning, which is front page of the Daily Telegraph this morning, which has incensed many people? Net zero drive will raise the cost of holidays, 300 quid on a holiday, because we're moving towards sustainable aviation fuel, apparently. I'd like to know who voted for this. What are your thoughts on this? Are you happy about this? Another 300 quid?
Yes. In short, yes, because I guess you'd also have to talk about sustainable aviation fuel. Yes, that's a huge part. And sustainable fuel and energy is sort of a personal passion for me. I've worked on, covering hydrogen as a fuel source quite recently. And all roads lead back to the fact that the current infrastructure isn't good enough to properly apply any sort of, sustainable fuel. And probably the one place where you can effectively do that is aviation. And the important thing is you don't have to change a lot.
Right, but the thing about this is that we are saddled with this net zero by 2030. India, China, building these massive power stations. We contribute 1% of global emissions. What are we doing?
Well,
we're making people poorer.
Well, yes, but you also have to think about what Britain consumes in terms of the consumerist attitude, which, obviously is because of globalization. A lot of the manufacturing has gone away from Britain, which means that, yes, while Britain by itself emits, a much lower percentage of what other manufacturing behemoths would emit, it's the fact that a lot of the products that are manufactured abroad then end up here. So either you'll have to sort globalization out and bring back manufacturing here and then take on the burden of that pollution, or deal with the benefits of having lower pollution.
So you're saying it's Britain's problem?
Rates.
Is it Britain's problem?
I think to a large extent it is.
Is it?
Yeah,
look at the population of India, of China, for example, Russia.
Yeah. And
we contribute 1%. Why are we doing all this work?
Yes, the iPhones that are manufactured in India, a lot of them are sold here, a lot of them are sold in America, but that doesn't mean...
A lot of them sold in India?
Yes, that undoubtedly, right? Yeah, a lot of them are sold in India, which is why countries with the space and the resources to make that shift should do it first, right? Because the industrial revolution started here.
It did.
And it benefited somewhere else.
So Aditya is saying, okay, so we were the founders of the Industrial Revolution. We're a more advanced economy. I'm paraphrasing for you. Even though we're 1% of global emissions, it's the responsible thing to do. Your thoughts?
Well, look, if you want people to get behind a scheme, one thing it can't do is make them poorer. I, for one, am not going to get behind anything if it's going to take money out of my pocket. And I'm sure we'd all love to live in a sustainable environment, but we'll only do that. There's a right time and a right place for that, and that's the problem that they've not solved. They've got all these wonderful ideas, but they've not got the right time, and we're not in the right place. Everybody's feeling the pinch at the moment, the cost of living. Nobody wants to pay £300 more for their holiday.
And in terms of that, would you welcome a referendum on net zero?
Yeah, I think so.
Did anyone ask you whether you wanted net zero?
No.
Did anyone ask you?
Well, I think net zero is an important goal to reach.
But did anyone ask you?
No.
Did anyone ask the electors? The people?
No, definitely not. But if you look at what I think with Labour at least, right, and their plan for Great British Energy and how increasing sustainable fuels across the board is supposedly a priority, while you're handing out more licenses for more fossil fuel explorations. That doesn't happen simultaneously. You're contradicting yourself by saying that. So if your goal is truly to reach net zero, then you must have to, you then have to look at who the biggest polluters are, right? The manufacturing industry is especially one of the most polluting industry. You have to take them to task. Maybe a one-off environmental tax is, something that could...
You like tax. You like taxing all these companies.
I love it.
Do you?
Yes.
Is tax the right way? I mean, surely this should be about carrot, not stick.
If we're taxing all these companies and we're putting tax here, we'll tax this, we'll tax that. Eventually, people will turn around and say, actually, I've had enough of Britain, I'm not coming back.
Which is what we're seeing.
We're seeing it already, as you say. So we need to be very careful. This tax word is a very easy word to throw around, but we need to be careful with how we're throwing it around.
So can I just ask you about something much more sort of general? There is a new trend for young people. You're 18. I don't know how old you are.
22.
Sorry, 22, baby. So lots of young people are saying, and we were talking about this, about quality of life, going to a 4-day week, for example. There is a new trend, apparently, if you're a few years into your job. It's called micro-retirement. This is a popularity trend that's growing amongst Gen Z and millennials. This is where you take a break from your career for a couple of months. Let me ask you, how important is work-life balance? And also, what age do you think you'll retire? I know you're only 22.
I'm only 22. Retirement seems like a long way away, and it seems even longer away with, the way life looks right now, with how difficult it is to get on the housing ladder, with how difficult it is to, just live. The cost of living is outrageous, especially in London, where you step out and you get charged £3.30 for taking the stairs down from your apartment. It's not easy, and
It's not easy.
I can sympathize with the idea of micro retirements, which are really just another way of saying sabbatical, right?
Yes.
You take a sabbatical off of work. This isn't a new concept. This isn't something that happened day before yesterday on TikTok and is suddenly the talk of town. This has existed, right? It's just that people are now getting peeved that it's the younger people who are doing it, because you would have to be in the middle of your career to take a sabbatical before. People are just getting fed up of the vicious cycle of work, pay off your debt, and accrue more debt to work.
Well, let me tell you, in about 10 minutes' time, you'll be 50. The time goes very quickly. Let me just ask you, if I may, about school children. There's another great story saying that there's a trial going on of kids who are only going to school for 4 days a week, not 5 days a week, because they need work-life balance. Don't children need to learn?
Well, I think they need to learn, and they need to learn about things that are important to becoming successful in life. And I think it's a ludicrous fantasy idea to have children thinking that they're going to go to school 4 days a week. When they go out into the big wide world and somebody says, oh, sorry, you've got to work 5 days a week, they're not going to cope. And that is going to then lead, I imagine, to more mental health issues, because we're going to have children that then say, what do you mean I've got an extra day? I've got got to go to work for an extra day. I've done 4 years for the last 5 years. Yeah. 4 days for the last 5 years.
I mean, it does seem that young people seem to be quite cosseted, and particularly when you interview them, which I have, and they say, well, I want to have work-life balance, I want to work from home, I want to do 3 days of work. Well, guess what? You can't. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Really good to see you. Aditya Dattatreya, broadcast journalist, student at the City University. Nathan Robbins, apprentice mechanic. That was today's Future Politics panel.
The Future Politics panel.
Well, thanks ever so much. Keep all of your messages coming in. Jess in Dover, good morning to you. It scares me when people say private schools shouldn't exist. We don't live in a communist country. How many steps are we away from being told that you can't buy a blue jumper? You can only buy a red jumper. Lots of other messages. Steve says, all the talk of which party leads the opinion polls misses the main problem. The most popular option at the last election was none of the above, which is a really important point that you raise. Good morning, David. What a great Future Politics panel you have on this morning. Both very thoughtful in their views, very, very eloquent. Our current crop of MPs could learn a lot from them. That's Nicola in Norfolk. There we are. What a great resounding success for our Future Politics panel this morning. We'll take a break. After the break, we'll be back with more of this morning's top stories. Also, we have our Sunday surgery coming up about the role of AI. I'm going to be talking about the Golden Globes as well, 9:30. That's tonight, the first of those award ceremonies from the United States. And, of course, we'll be taking your calls, your thoughts and your messages. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
These rape gangs are an utter scandal, and the failure of the police to promptly and professionally address these matters, prevent further harm and arrest the perpetrators is a deep, dark stain upon our nation. I think a public inquiry is fully justified. I'd like to see all the dirty laundry washed in public so that we know who was responsible, who said don't go in there, and the such like, and we can have some accountability.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk 8:52. Well, another one bites the dust. It transpires the former Conservative MP for Dudley North, Marco Longhi, has defected to Reform UK. On top of that, of course, Andrea Jenkins, Kemi Badenoch, calling out Nigel Farage and the numbers, sheer numbers of people joining Reform UK, 170,000, saying, oh, it's not real, it's automated. And, of course, that turned out not to be true. Alfie Kingett, A-level student, joins me this morning. We're having a morning of young politicians, which I think is incredibly refreshing. And the country would be a lot better if all of you ran it. Just in terms of that, you know, you're a Conservative supporter. Is Badenoch the right leader?
Well, I mean, I think with Badenoch, it's definitely a weird choice. Of course, not many people originally wanted her, and then as the, of course, campaign for her leadership went on, a lot more people warmed up to her. Of course, now she's in, it's a very tumultuous position because some people don't like her, some people like her, and it's, do we stay or do we go? And I think in this position, I think for the benefit of the party long term, you have to stick it out. It goes back to the old saying...
it would be a terrible look, wouldn't it?
It would be a terrible look, yeah. But I think it goes back to the old saying, if you can't stand me at my worst, you don't deserve me at my best. And I think that's the current case with the party, in that currently the party is on its knees and it is struggling. And a lot of people are seeing that and they're going, well, I think it'll be easier to jump ship. But the reality of the situation is, though, the Conservatives have been a party for good knows how many years. They have massive historical ties in the UK. They're going to rebound eventually.
And that's wishful thinking, isn't it?
I have a good feeling about it. Seeing the effort that especially local campaigners in Croydon make, I see a lot of how the Conservatives have benefited Croydon over the last few years.
But I would argue that, sure, so you've got brilliant people, let's say, from all parties in their local areas. Isn't one of the biggest problems has been over-centralisation of those parties? And I would level that at David Cameron. He took power away from the local associations. And when you do that and you over-centralise and impose their lists, so their candidate lists on people, the A-list, as it was called back in the day, which I was on 100 years ago. But when you impose that, then that is when the local structures fall apart. And at the end of the day, you've got to rely on people like you to deliver leaflets, to knock on doors, to actually get voting intention out.
I think it's a very weird situation which there has to be a perfect balance. You can't overly impose yourself on the council because otherwise not much council work is going to get done. But you can't be too lenient on the council because otherwise things will just fall apart, as a lot of people in Croydon saw in the early 2000s.
So just listening to Nathan, he's 18, he's just been on, he's an apprentice mechanic, he's gone to Reform, we're seeing a rise of Reform, as I said. Young people, which I still find extraordinary, young people tend to be at their most liberal and left-wing as they're younger. They then tend to gravitate towards centrist and right-of-centre parties as they get older. You've got Nathan supporting Reform UK and you supporting the Conservative Party. Do you see young people supporting Labour?
All the time at college. Of course, the Labour Party is very, very popular at the college I go to, and a lot of people like them and the policies they want to implement. And I think that's because as younger people, we don't really have such wide kind of knowledge of the world. We're still learning, we're still developing.
I think everyone is.
We mix with a lot more people on a day-to-day basis because you've got all your different cultures and they're all blending at colleges and universities across the country. And then, of course, as people get older, they begin slowly but surely shutting down and realising that sometimes you have to maybe help yourself in some situations, which does mean you can't help others.
Yeah. Can I just ask you, though, in terms of that big Mail article about Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year, how much trouble is he in?
He is in so much trouble. He is going down like a sack of bricks, and it's terrible. I mean, of course, I think ideally he would be gone and, you know, the Conservatives, Reform, the Lib Dems, we can all fight it out to see who next gets Parliament. But I don't think that's going to happen because, of course, Parliament, they're not going to call another election, have people sift through all of that again, because people don't want to do it.
And just in terms of that, I mean, the Conservative Party are ruthless at getting rid of their leaders. They're extremely good at it. The Labour Party tends not to do that. Let me ask you that question, though. Who do you think is the biggest threat to Keir Starmer? Is it Kemi Badenoch? Is it Nigel Farage? Is it someone in the Labour Party, Wes Streeting? Is it Angela Rayner? Is it Elon Musk, which is an interesting one? Is it Donald Trump? When you've got people like David Lammy calling Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, and indeed Peter Mandelson hasn't exactly been kind, and of course he's now the liaison with the leader of the free world.
It's going to go great. All I can say on that is I think currently Starmer has a lot of threats to him, and I think a lot of these threats may be viable to take him out. However, I think the next big threat that will actually come unexpectedly will be young people. Young people are really starting to wake up and realise the dangers of a Labour government, and I'm seeing it in college, asking around. People are very unhappy with what's happening.
Right, and how old are you?
17. So, of course, if a lot of people are very unhappy in colleges, it's screaming something must be wrong. And I do believe that come the next election, when these young people who are, of course, going through the system now get the eligibility to vote, they're not going to vote for Labour because they've seen how much of a train wreck Starmer's government has been, in a sense.
And if you were to list your priorities, what for you is the most pressing priority? What is the thing that you are most concerned about?
Regarding what exactly?
Well, in terms of your voting intention, is it, as the Sunday Times has it, is it defence of the nation? Is it immigration? Is it the economy? Is it the NHS? What is the one thing, if there is one, that you are most passionate about?
I think in total, I think it would just be all of them in general, because each one has an interplay into each other, and you can't have a decent economy without good national security, and you can't have good national security, of course, without a good economy. They all go hand in hand with each other.
They do indeed. Do you think that the current government is listening to the electorate?
Of course not. They are brutally abusing and forcing elderly people who can't afford the winter fuel tax to freeze. They are brutally mishandling farmers and basically telling them that generational farms can no longer, of course, be transferred down. And they're starting to go at university students by planning to raise tuition fees.
Really good to talk to you. Thank you so much for coming in. That's Alfie Kingett, an A-level student who is 17, who has far more common sense than many politicians I know. Thanks ever so much for coming in. Time for a break. After the break, it's our Sunday Surgery. We're going to be talking about the future of AI. Can that be the solution to the woes of the NHS? Mal Fletcher, a futurist, will join me. Also this morning, we're going to be talking about the Golden Globes. The first of those award shows kicks off in the United States.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile. The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Hello, a very good morning to you. Just after 9 o'clock on Sunday, January the 5th. I've suddenly got a nighttime background behind me. Good morning. This is Weekend Breakfast. I'm David Bull. Really good to see you this morning. As you would expect, it's the weekend, so I have great news for you. It's National Bird Day today. That's right. It's a day dedicated to showing love and protection of our feathered friends. It's a time to raise awareness of the challenges that birds face globally and to encourage actions to safeguard them. And there they are. And there they are. Now, it is also today Whipped Cream Day. Oh, I say, how exciting. Today actually gives you the perfect excuse to indulge. The earliest known evidence of whipped cream actually appears in a recipe from 1549. The Italian Renaissance cook Cristoforo di Messibugo actually listed whipped cream as an ingredient in one of his recipes. Yum. Also, happy birthday to Bradley Cooper. He's one of the highest paid actors in the world. He was crowned sexiest man alive by People magazine in 2011. He's only a baby. He turns 50 today. Happy birthday. I'm aging myself. Let's move on, shall we, to the fascinating facts.
Today's fascinating facts.
Ah, there we go. Today's fascinating facts. Oh, it's daylight. Suddenly the sun has risen. Pope Clement the 7th in 1531 forbade English King Henry VIII to remarry. The event actually led to the creation of the Church of England. On this day in 1993, the oil tanker Brea was wrecked in hurricane-force winds off the Shetland Islands, discharging large amounts of oil. And on this day in 2001, and this has enormous ramifications for the medical profession to this day, there was a report funded by the Department of Health found the convicted serial killer, former general practitioner Harold Shipman, may have killed in excess of 300 of his patients. The official inquiry concluded that up to 15 patients who died between 1971 and 1974 at the former Pontefract General Infirmary could have been killed by Shipman based on their investigation into 137 deaths at Pontefract, which occurred whilst Shipman was actually a junior doctor there. The ramifications of this are enormous, and that has led to the registration revalidation process that all doctors now have to go through. And those are today's fascinating facts.
Oh, David Bull, waking up the sun with a heart of gold. He makes it day fun.
That's the best one ever. Best ever. Love that, Dave. Thank you very much. Good morning. Good morning. Big headlines this morning. The Sunday Times, if you are just waking up. NATO warns the UK of the ballistic missile threats. This is very sobering reading indeed. 2.3% of GDP we spend currently. Many people, very senior people in the military, saying we've been asleep at the wheel for far too long. And what this article says, it basically talks about the UK being asleep at the wheel, that ballistic missiles could strike within minutes, could hit London, major cities around the UK. They travel at 4,700 miles an hour, and it means that you could launch a missile at this country from anywhere in the world, and we would be pretty powerless to stop it. Some big headlines about the Royal Navy warships being struck by the missiles. Also, and this is crucial, British military bases abroad, like at Kriteri in Cyprus, and that makes me think about obviously the Chagos Islands as well, and Starmer just ditching all of those. Then it talks about militant groups in war-torn Middle Eastern countries being a major threat, and the amount of spending we have on defence. The Sunday Telegraph this morning. Yet more net zero madness. Yes, of course. Net zero drive will raise cost of holidays. This is about sustainable aviation fuel, because there's been this mandate where you have to have 2% of it has to be sustainable, rising to 10%, then 22%. Problem it's more expensive. We don't have very much of it, and it's being forced on the airlines. Now, that's more expensive, and of course the airline will then pass it on to us. It's worth remembering also we have all these green levies on plastic packaging coming in, and so the public being rinsed yet again for net zero. As I said to our young politicians, don't we need a referendum on all of this stuff? Because I don't remember voting for it. What the political parties will say to you was that it was in every single manifesto. Well, it wasn't, actually. It wasn't in one particular party's manifesto, but that's the big headline. And then this morning, this is what we've been concentrating on. A poll, Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. According to the copy, Sir Keir Starmer will be ousted as Prime Minister within a year. Furious voters attacking his poor handling of the economy, the NHS, immigration and the cost of living crisis. Very few people expect him to last the year. This is intriguing, though. 1 in 5 voters think Nigel Farage will be Britain's next Prime Minister. Keep your messages coming in, because I'm asking this morning, if that is true, and if Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year, why? And who is the threat? What is the threat to Starmer? Is it actually his own party, Wes Streeting, Angela Rayner? Could it be Farage? Is it going to be other noises off? Is it Kemi Badenoch? Or is it people like Elon Musk, the world's richest man, who has tweeted about 5-6 times in an hour about British policy, domestic policy, which must make very uncomfortable reading for Starmer? 0344 499 1000, those calls charged at the national rate. Loads of messages. Mary, good morning to you. Good morning, David. I love your show. Thank you. That's very sweet. Thank you very much. Just talking about young people, and we had 3 young politicians on this morning as a treat. Good morning, David. This is G in Birmingham. Great show, and good to see so many young people involved in politics. It's their futures, so they must engage. I disagree with Alfie about Kemi. Voters hate being lied to. Ask the Lib Dems, who spent a decade out in the wilderness. The Tories will see the same fate, maybe longer, considering it was 15 years of lies. Reform has struck a chord, but they have to ensure they deliver on what they preach, as Starmer won't last long. But him staying is the best thing for Labour to lose. And we were also talking about 4-day weeks for school children. David, 4 days a week for school children might not be such a bad idea. For the last 2 years in high school, use the 5th day as work experience in a career apprenticeship they wish to pursue to integrate them into working life. Keep all of those messages coming in. I have to say, all 3 of our young politicians, extremely erudite, really good ideas as well, and I think some of the grown-up politicians could take a leaf out of their book. Let's move on now and take a call. George is in London. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Just to let you know, I am a Reform member as well.
And a recent member?
No, I've been a member quite a while now, and I'm come under Hamish Haddo. Do you know Hamish?
I don't, I'm afraid, but...
Ethan Barnett. Anyway, let's see, this Starmer. Now, remember, Starmer's their best man. He's the best they have got.
That's right.
What have they failed on? They failed on the schools, where instead of teaching subjects to get people jobs, they're telling boys they should be girls and girls they should be boys. They failed on crime. There's crime rampant throughout the country. They failed on immigration. They failed on the economy. They failed on the NHS. I mean, you go to the NHS. I've been to use the NHS a lot. I go there for a test, for a procedure. 20 minutes of questions are about as relevant as your petunias in your garden.
Right.
Then I go in for the same old questions again. And the consultant turned around and apologised to me. He said, these questions had no relevance whatsoever to your test. But it's all these pen pushers making up this nonsense to justify their non-jobs. There is and now in the...
What sort of questions, then, were you asked?
Oh, I can't even remember what drugs I'm taking, which they know. Other stuff I can't remember. It was nothing whatsoever to do with the test.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing.
Probably how you identify and your sexuality and things that are totally irrelevant.
And in the paper today, Labour accused a plot to rig next election by axing voter ID scheme, which is an absolute recipe for fraud. That is why they want it, so they can just... It happened around my area. the Labour activists knocked on the doors. This is not the last election before, knocked on the doors saying, are you got votes? Oh, we're not voting. Anyway, they changed their minds, decided to vote. Someone have voted for them. And that's exactly what will happen. Tell me one thing that Labour have done any good.
Oh, they're rolling out the NHS app tomorrow. They're rolling out the app. They're going to say you can choose 5 hospitals. What else are they doing? Wes Streeting's getting rid of 1 million appointments that aren't necessary because apparently he's now a clinician.
Well, if you got the hospitals, at one time where I live in Edgware, you had Edgware General shut down by the Tories disgracefully. Chase Farm shut down. Royal Orthopaedic Hospital used to have an A&E. That was shut down. So there's one A&E from Enfield to Harrow or to Hampstead.
Well, they'd argue that's progress because you've got centres of excellence.
Well, that's absolute rubbish. You try and get in Barnet, you sit there 14 hours. And people going there, they've got a cold, they're going to A&E. They've stubbed their toes, they're going to A&E. It is utterly ridiculous.
So just based on that headline, who or what is the biggest threat to Starmer?
Him and his policies.
So him rather than the party, or him and the party?
A lot of them. They are absolutely useless. Not one of them is fit to do that.
So can I just ask you about our young politicians, all of whom were incredibly impressive and erudite? It's just fascinating to see the way that young people are so engaged in politics and voting in a non-tribal way, which I haven't seen in my political lifetime.
Well, I think the youngsters, you talk to a lot of youngsters, they've come along and think, well, one day I want to have a home. You've got no... I speak to a lot of them because I'm involved in boxing, so I talk to loads of them. I say, you've got no hope of ever getting a home. Not any chance in the world. And this is the 14, 15, 16-year-olds. By the time you got there, and we're getting 1 million people in a year. I mean, how are you going to house all these people? And what did Labour say? They're going to build
1.5 million over 5 years. That's 300,000 a year.
You need that a year.
Well, that's very true.
Immigration and to get something off the backlog. They honestly, it's unsustainable. They're screaming in Canada about having 1 million come in. 1.2 million came in Canada. And the new guy's going to be the Prime Minister. He said people can't get home. That country is 42 times bigger than the UK, and they're going mad out there about the immigration. America's the same situation. It's unsustainable. I don't know what the reason is behind it. I think Labour want it possibly for the votes.
Yeah, we shall see. George, really good to talk to you this morning. That's George in London. Let me know your thoughts, please. Who or what is the biggest threat to Starmer? 0344 499 1000. So many messages coming on. But now it's time for Sunday Surgery.
Dr. David Bull's Sunday Surgery.
This is a really fascinating conversation because Wes Streeting is essentially saying, I can cut waiting lists by involving AI. You can cut waiting lists by having wearables. You can have tech. Now, one of the problems to this is that actually a lot of the burden, or a significant amount of the burden of healthcare inequality is with older people. As you get older, you tend to have a number of health issues. They're often connected. They may be unrelated. But also you've got a problem in that technology may be a solution in some parts of medicine, but also it does rely on the user being able to use some of that technology. So it's kind of chicken and egg. Joining me now, Mal Fletcher, who's a futurist. Good morning.
Good morning, David. Nice to be with you on, was it Whipped Cream Day?
Whipped Cream Day, that's right. Yes, it's a highlight of my year, let me tell you. Not very good for my coronary arteries. But let's talk about AI, because tomorrow, Wes Streeting is unveiling their plan to save the NHS. He's pinning this on AI pretty much. He's talking about wearables, he's talking about tech, the use of AI in diagnosis and targeted treatment plans and so on. There is a role.
Yeah, there is a role for AI. It's not going to solve a lot of the problems with the NHS because, as we heard from your previous caller, they happen to be largely political in nature and administrative in nature. And AI is a good servant. It's not a very good master, but it's a very good servant. It will do what we give it to do if we define clearly what we want. I think, though, that in terms of the technology itself, there are great opportunities for us to take in the next few years with things like implants. In the next couple of years, companies like Neuralink are going to be producing brain implants, for example, small as a grain of sand, based on nanotechnology, which is rapidly emerging now in the world of tech. And we'll start to see implants that are made from biodegradable material that actually dissolve in the body once they've served their purpose. So that's going to reduce the number and degree of invasive surgeries needed with things like chips, whether they're retinal chips, cochlear chips, brain chips. And of course, there's also great developments in spinal stimulators. And for people watching this, listening to this, who have chronic pain, this could be good news in the medium term, helping alleviate chronic pain with much more targeted ability than we have at the moment because of AI's capacity. So it's not going to solve all the problems, but as you say, there are opportunities.
And so just in terms of treatment modalities, the role also, and we're starting to see this a great deal, is sort of robots being used in operative techniques as well, and that enhances the skills of the surgeons.
Yes, indeed. In fact, it's important for us to say right here and now that AI can't replace the human being in areas like medical science, because human beings have an ability computers don't have, and that is the ability to empathize. So the therapeutic side of medicine will become more important, and I think should be probably more highlighted in the training of new medicos, because we are able to use imagination to interact with someone else, imagine what they're feeling, and respond in kind. And that's one thing that machines, by definition, cannot have, a shared human experience.
When I was training, we were taught that 90% of your diagnosis is in the history, i.e. you talk to the patient, you glean the information, and you put it into a sort of what is called Occam's razor. You put it into a funnel, and you work out what symptoms are important, and you come up with your working differential diagnosis. What I find fascinating is when you ask artificial intelligence to do that, it's not very good at that patient... well, it's absolutely rubbish at the patient communication thing, because there are lots of things that you rely on as a clinician. It's not necessarily just the answers, it's the way that people answer it, or the avoidance of eye gaze, or whatever it is. There is definitely something that human beings can do, which is to interpret those more subtle symptoms.
Yeah, that's true. That said, I think doctors and patients will benefit in the next few years from AI-driven biometrics. We already use facial, voice and gait recognition powered by AI. They're being developed for the police and security agencies. There are all sorts of ethical questions with that. But we're now seeing early developments with 3D facial recognition, and that could be much more detailed in the data it provides, and it could help to, and I put this in inverted commas, read emotions by doing exactly what you've said, more accurately tracking subtle facial muscular movements. So doctors could be assisted in gauging a patient's general health, particularly if we move more in the direction of digital surgeries. And as I say, we could end up with slightly more targeted treatment plans. But once again, it's important to say, as you said, that AI has limitations and it cannot replace humans in the loop when it comes to medicine.
And one of the big, I suppose, the frontiers of medicine is drug development. Getting new drugs is through the regulatory process from the inception and then into people's hands is a very long timeline, 20 years or thereabouts. One of the things that I think is fascinating is the repurposing of drugs, and I think AI plays a role, doesn't it?
Yes, it can do. I mean, AI, because of its capacity to read through swathes, oceans of data in very quick time, can help us, for example, to match up certain molecular combinations to find out which ones would provide the most likely solutions to specific problems. And in the short term, I think we're going to see great developments for that reason in areas like oncology and heart disease, where we already have huge amounts of data on the data banks. And AI models might also help improve with Alzheimer's and Parkinson's in time, and it could be used to repurpose, as you say, existing drugs to help us deal with potential pandemics in years to come. And if you combine all of that with additive manufacturing, which most of us call 3D printing, we might find that it makes its way into pharmaceuticals in the same way that it's made its way now into prosthetics, so that in time we might even have automated pharmacies using AI to 3D print prescribed drugs on site, obviously with strict security protocols, but that could alleviate pressures on some of the struggling NHS systems.
Well, and you mentioned the struggling NHS systems there and capacity issues within the health service. Wes Streeting is also talking about creating virtual wards. So for a long time, they've talked about this panacea of remote monitoring. So the idea that you have wearable tech, so things that monitor whether it's your pulse, your blood glucose, whether it's your blood pressure or whatever it is. How near are we to making this a reality? Because I know tech firms have been chasing this for many, many years. It still hasn't quite reached its zenith.
No, it hasn't. And one of the issues we're going to face with implants and wearables, and implants are a big area for the UK in the next 2 years too, but one of the problems we're going to face is the question of, and it is an ethical question, a very human one, where do we draw the line between humanity and its tools? You know, the line's being blurred now as we invite tech into our bodies. We have to face the reality that the more we rely on implants or wearables, the more we make our bodies trackable and hackable devices. Any computerized device can, at least in theory, be hacked. So we have to answer these important ethical questions. And what concerns me, David, is that whilst we have talk fests between politicians and big tech leaders, we don't have any widespread debates calling on many professionals at once, say from the worlds of biology, the worlds of psychology, the worlds of philosophy, even theology, who have important things to contribute when the question is fundamentally, what does it mean to be human? So all of those questions will arise. It won't be just administrative problems that we're solving. We need to address those as well.
Finally, if I may, one of the biggest problems that has been kicked into the long grass, which is social care, and they're now not going to actually come up with a plan till 2028, which is far too late in my humble opinion. But just in terms of that, one of the biggest problems we have, an ageing population sitting at home, increasingly isolated. We know older people desperately need company to keep their grey matter active. Is there a role for technology here in terms of keeping people company? We spoke, I think, yesterday about AI robots, that you can chat to someone or chat to a robot and that helps you in terms of your social isolation.
Yes, well, countries like Japan have been developing for many years what are technically called soft bots. They're basically, you know, soft robots. They respond in very sociable ways to actions. They read biometrics in a quite rudimentary way and respond in kind. And we have a picture on the screen of a less soft version of that. And so in Japan, just about 10 years ago, when this was just beginning to be developed, people in aged care homes that used the bots were asked the question, do you prefer the robot or the human carer? And something like 70% said we prefer the robot variety. And I suspect that was simply because there were more of them available. So we're certainly going to need humans in the loop there too, if only to, one, correct mistakes made by robots, but also to help that empathy level stay high. So I don't think we're going to replace people in old care facilities with soft bots anytime soon.
Oh, but how can you resist their eyes looking at you like that? Mal, really good to talk to you. Mal Fletcher there, futurist about the role of technology in providing healthcare and to help the NHS and the burden that it faces currently. We'll take a break. After the break, I want to talk about the Golden Globes. Tonight is the first of those award ceremonies. When I lived in LA, this was all they ever talked about, was award ceremonies and who's wearing what. And do you really care? I mean, Johnny Hearn, talks a film reporter and filmmaker, will be joining me after this break to tell us all the runners and riders and who is expected to win. This is Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
talking political spin here, but I just don't know yet. I mean, it's 4 years away, like you said, that's forever in politics. I would really like to rejoin the Labour Party. I'd like to recognise it as the Labour Party that I joined and have always been supportive of. But
Because you think the Labour Party has left you rather than you having left it?
Yeah, that's how it feels. That's how a lot of my colleagues feel. You know, we don't recognise this as the Labour Party. You know, I get a lot of jibes online. Why doesn't she just join Reform? That's not my politics at all. You know, Jeremy Corbyn's about as likely to join Reform as I am.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
This is Talk 9:29, front page of the Mail this morning. Starmer will be out of number 10 in a year. Lots of politics making the headlines this morning. My friend and colleague Peter Cardwell will be here in just half an hour's time. He's got Wes Streeting coming on the show. Of course, as we know, he's Health Secretary. He's also unveiling his great solution and panacea for the NHS, which is an NHS app. He talks about patients being able to have the choice of 5 different hospitals. I would question how do they make that decision, but that's Wes Streeting at 10. He's then following that up at 5 to 11 with an interview with Chris Philp, who's Shadow Home Secretary. And then at 11 o'clock, Richard Tice, MP, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, will be joining Peter at 11 o'clock this morning. So a fun-packed morning still to come here on Talk. Let's talk now about the Golden Globes. I was saying I used to live in LA. Today, the Golden Globes is the first of those award ceremonies. This is what Tinseltown is all about, which is the Golden Globes. Joining me now, Johnny Hearn, Talk's film reporter and filmmaker. Good morning.
Hello, good morning.
And Golden Globes, it is kind of important, and certainly in the industry. Just talk us through why these awards are so important, because I'm not sure they're really aimed at the public. They're aimed at each other, aren't they?
Well, the Golden Globes are different because they are voted by members of the Hollywood Foreign Press Association. That's why it's a Golden Globe.
Right.
So it's not an industry award.
Right.
It's a journalist award. And, of course, you know, the industry thrives on publicity. And so the opinions of the Hollywood Foreign Press are kind of important to the industry because they're the films that they like are the ones that they're going to promote more, and that's the way we do it. And you know, I tend to like to review films that I like rather than review films I don't like, because you know you like to talk about things that you like. So so that in that sense it matters because they're not an industry inside award. For example, say the Oscars are. So that's what sets them apart. That makes them different. Right. It's also why they have different categories. It's why they also cover TV as well as film.
So let's stick with film at the moment. What are the big films that are making the headlines, or what do you think is actually going to do well?
Well, it won't be any surprise to know that some of the big films you won't know about because they haven't been released over here yet.
Right, OK, well, that would make sense.
So, one of the big films, The Brutalist, yeah, probably have no idea what that is. That's a film starring Adrian Brody. It's a post-World War II drama. It's kind of like an unofficial sort of follow-up to The Pianist, although it's not the same character, but it's sort of seen as that. Very gritty drama. That's been doing very well. Conclave, which you may have heard of, the film with Ray Fiennes, Stanley Tucci about the electing of the new Pope. That is absolutely brilliant.
Is it?
I'm really hoping that does well.
Okay.
That's a really, really good drama, and Ray Fiennes is just absolutely stunning in that. Nickel Boys, well, that only came out this weekend. I'm actually going to see it today, so I can't really talk about that, but that's getting a lot of buzz. Dune Part 2, which I thought was rubbish. I never really got into the Dune movies.
No, I didn't.
September 5, which I haven't even heard about until I read it just now.
Right.
And A Complete Unknown, which I am really looking forward to, and I hope this does well. This is the biopic about Bob Dylan, and it stars Timothée Chalamet, who's also nominated for Best Actor. And he learned how to play the guitar. He learned how to sing like Bob Dylan. He learned how to play the harmonica, and all the musical performances within that film are live. They're done as we call in camera, rather than him miming to a backing track. So I'm really looking forward to it. I've seen the trailers. The trailers look great. So I'm really hoping that that does well, because I love Bob Dylan. I think it looks like a really interesting biopic. So that's the pictures of the best drama category. But the Globes also have a best musical and comedy category, which the Oscars don't. So in there they have films like Honora, which is that's a really interesting film. That's like a grown-up version of Pretty Woman.
Okay.
It's a quite brutal version of that. Challengers, which I thought was a bit, it's about tennis players, rivalry. It wasn't very good. Amelia Perez. Now,
why didn't you like that?
I don't know. I just thought it was a bit of a naff story.
Okay.
Fair enough. I mean, it's
fair enough,
subjective.
Yes. Horses for courses.
Yeah, Amelia Perez, and this is a film that's a Spanish-language film that's getting a lot of traction. Zoe Saldana has been nominated for this. It's a musical about a gangster, a transgender gangster, and a lawyer trying to protect him. It's a very bizarre movie.
And I think it's worth pointing out, actually, how large that Spanish audience is, isn't it?
Oh, because in America.
Right, and of course you've got, particularly on the West Coast as well, you've got a huge Latino population as well.
Yeah, there's almost as many Spanish speakers in America as there are English speakers, so it's a massive audience. And good on Netflix for doing that, and for Zoe Saldana also to do a Spanish language film, because they could very easily have just said, no, we're going to do it in English, but they didn't. And then Wicked, of course, the film which everybody knows.
Have you seen it?
No.
Oh, okay.
I will do now. It's going to be nominated.
Well, loads of people have said it's really good. I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen it. I'm not a massive fan of musicals, but I will watch it now that I have to. A Real Pain, which is out this Friday, which I haven't seen yet, but that's getting a lot of traction. And the film called The Substance. I don't know if you saw that.
I haven't. I'm in this building the whole time.
Fair enough. It's a film with Demi Moore plays this aging actress. Now, who would have thought to cast Demi Moore as an aging actress?
Exactly.
Who is desperate to be younger again because younger actresses are getting all the work, and so she takes this sort of medical course that physically gives birth to a younger version of herself. On the condition that she can only be that younger version of herself for 1 week, then she has to go back to being her real self, and then she can go back again, so flip-flop 1 week. And but of course the younger self, played by Margaret Qualley, likes being young again a bit too much, and so steals time away from the older version of herself, and as she does that, she sort of degenerates.
That sounds quite interesting.
It's an amazing film. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes last year. It's called The Substance.
Right.
And that's an absolutely brilliant film. Yeah. It's why it's in the comedy or musical, I don't know, because it's not a musical, and isn't that funny? I've got to tell you. But I'm glad it's nominated, because it was a really stunning movie.
Okay, and so that's film, and then television is. We were just talking about that in the break. Television is enormous now, and of course the role of streaming services like Netflix, so you're now getting these almost massive movies, aren't you, chopped up into various episodes, so we binge watch whatever it is. I watched The Jackal, for example. I just couldn't put that down. I'm watching Dharma at the moment. So this is a big part of Hollywood now.
It used to be, years ago, that TV was the poor relative of film.
Exactly.
And so movie actors who ended up doing TV, they were doing it because they couldn't get acting jobs in movies anymore, and they really were looked down on, say 20 years ago, really looked down on. But you're right, with the advent of streaming services, they can put money into TV dramas, and TV drama and comedy, the budgets have gone up and up and up and up, and now they have become epic long-form dramas, and as big budgets as movies. Off the top of my head, the new series of Andorra, the Star Wars spin-off, 22 episodes for season 2, $650 million budget for 22 episodes. For 22 hours of it, So that's the kind of level that they're now putting at. And some of them, they are absolutely massive. I watched Ripley the other day. That was, binge watched that. That was, a beautiful and absolutely amazing drama. So, they also have a best drama and best musical comedy. So the comedy, Only Murders in the Building.
Is that funny?
Yeah, very funny.
Okay.
The Gentleman.
Best Murder in the Building.
Only Murderers in the Building.
Okay.
Very good comedy. The Gentleman, that was very good. The Bear, which I didn't really like, the comedy about a chef. I didn't particularly get that. Day of the Jackal was nominated.
You like tennis, you don't like chefs?
I don't like tennis, and I don't like chefs. My dad played tennis a lot, so sorry, Dad.
It's very deep, that.
Day of the Jackal is nominated in the best drama category for that. But again, quite a few I haven't seen.
I thought that was excellent, apart from the end.
Really? Okay. That does happen quite a lot, actually.
Well, I was just like, oh.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have to pause.
Yes.
If you stay with me, we'll go to a break. We'll continue talking about the Golden Globes and Tinseltown after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Talking about the Golden Globes, of course, the first of those award ceremonies taking place in LA. In fact, in the Beverly Hilton, which was down the road from where I used to live. Joining me now, Johnny Hearn, Talk's film reporter and filmmaker. Now,
Yes.
You've got some clips, I believe.
Yeah, well, you said you hadn't seen, or you didn't know anything about Anora.
I know
which,
nothing about
with one of the films nominated. So let's have a little clip about that. The sort of adult pretty woman.
Okay.
You don't have cash? Let's go to the ATM. Well, we could go chill out in a private room.
I got a kid who wants someone who speaks Russian.
My Russian is terrible. I can't even roll my R's.
No.
Я просто хотел тебе предложить. Ты хочешь быть эксклюзивно со мной?
15. Cash up front.
Deal.
Deal.
I have no idea what I watched then.
So she's a sex worker. She meets this very young billionaire's son, Russian billionaire's son. He takes a liking to it. This is very similar to Pretty Woman. He spends a week with her, falls in love with her. They get married in Vegas. But here's the twist. His parents don't like the idea of it. They fly in from, they're kind of sort of gangster characters. They fly in from Russia and basically persecute her until she agrees to get divorced and annul the marriage.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So the
pretty-
first half is very light and fluffy, like that, like you saw. But the second half, it suddenly turns and becomes this very, very gritty and sort of fight for survival kind of story. It's very, very good. The two leading actors both nominated. The director Sean Baker's nominated. I think it will win 2 or 3 because it's been getting a lot of publicity, this film, and it is very, very good.
All right, I shall watch that. What else have you got for us?
I've got a little clip of The Brutalist. We
Okay.
mentioned that, the Adrian Brody movie, which I've not seen yet, so I'm interested to see
Fine.
this.
Okay. Well, I didn't really learn very much from that either. What So what's that about?
So it's about a man who, an entrepreneur who manages to escape Germany in 1947. He goes to America to start a new life, but he falls in basically with the wrong group of people who make his life miserable. Adrian Brody and Felicity Jones both nominated for that. He's nominated for Best Film. Director has been nominated for that. I think that will do quite well because again, people who've seen this seem to absolutely love it. So I'm very much looking forward to it.
Well, I just saw Guy Pearce's name in that as well.
Yes,
I haven't heard from him for years.
Yeah, he's been quite quiet. He does sort of pop up every so often, but he's not as prolific as he used to be.
No. Okay, and so otherwise, what else is in the TV categories? I read here Baby Reindeer. Is that still running?
Yeah, that's been nominated. I believe the actress who was brilliant in that.
She was absolutely
so
stunning.
good. I believe that she is. She's been nominated for that. I can't even find the category. I know she's got.
I can tell you like film more.
I do. Yeah. The lead actor Richard Gadd, he was nominated for that. And Jessica Gunning, that's her name. She's
he wrote it as well. I think.
He said it was based on sort of true story, which was where all the kind of the legal side of things came about.
Yeah, I thought it was.
I loved it. I thought it was a brilliant series. I thought she was absolutely amazing,
terrifying,
Yeah. But in this kind of sort of sweet and innocent kind of way, which
makes her more terrifying.
Exactly. I thought if she doesn't win, I'll be really disappointed because I think she was absolutely stunning in that.
Now, also they've broken, well, not broken with tradition, but in the old days, the Golden Globes was basically two people in the theatre or in film, and they would then go up and present the awards. Then they introduced the idea of a host, and my understanding is Ricky Gervais rather broke that mould when he did it. And now this year, who is hosting it? Nikki Glaser, who I have no idea who that is.
I have no idea who she is.
Now, isn't that interesting? But this is a massive deal. It's a massive gig.
It's Ricky Gervais made it a huge gig because he made it very controversial by roasting Hollywood,
which is a very American word. So basically taking the mickey out of the industry.
Yeah, and but in quite a very brutal way. I mean, some of the jokes that Ricky Gervais has come up with over the years are so close to the truth as well that they make you laugh, but they also make a lot of people in the audience wince. And he did make people very uncomfortable with some of the things he said because he was using it also to expose some of the Hollywood is Tinseltown as we know, but there is a darker side to Hollywood, and a lot of it doesn't get reported. And he used it to expose quite a lot of the sort of darker side of Hollywood. So there was a lot of sort of scrunched faces at some of the gags whilst other people were laughing.
I seem to remember Brad Pitt was there with a sort of looking like he was chewing a wasp because he didn't really know how to react. And I think when you make those jokes that are so close to the line, that you could see the execs there and then you could see the stars there, all of whom know how that industry works. And as you say, there is a dark side.
But he kept coming back, they kept inviting him back, and it really sort of helped break Ricky Gervais in America.
Well, apparently Nikki Glaser makes history as the first woman to sole host the Golden Globes. Well, good luck to her. I mean, that must be a huge gig. I mean, to host something in front of luminaries of film and television.
It can be a make or break thing for your career, because if you get that wrong, if you get the tone wrong, if you stumble, if you're not confident, then you can kill your career off. Or like Ricky Gervais, I mean, he thrives in a situation like that. His stand-up shows are very, very funny. So he doesn't mind having a bad reaction to a gag either. So he absolutely thrived in that, and it really sort of launched him in America. So.
Well, and apparently she's approached him for advice.
Oh, I'm not surprised.
Well, his advice was be yourself. You're not one of them.
Yeah.
Don't try to walk out acting like you're an A-lister because you're not.
Yeah.
And that's probably really, really good advice. And so this is the first of many. I mean, this goes on for months, doesn't it, the award ceremonies?
They end with the Oscars. It's around about mid to end of February. So we've got about 5 weeks of it. The BAFTAs used to come after the Oscars in March, but what used to happen was that nobody cared about the BAFTAs because the Oscars had happened and they were the big one. So they then had to shift it to before.
So that's really interesting. As a member of BAFTA, I then saw how that became quite big in the United States, and of course there was a huge push by the British consulate as well to try and make the BAFTAs more appealing.
They're the biggest one before the Oscars. So it's the litmus test for the Oscars. The Golden Globes aren't as such, because as I said, they're voted for by journalists and not people who are within the industry. So quite often, the big winners at the Globes don't then go on to win at the BAFTAs and the Oscars, because they're voted for by different groups of people. But the Oscars, the BAFTAs very much are kind of now an indicator. They're usually sort of 2 weeks before the Oscars, very much a strong indicator of who is going to win at the Oscars, although they've already been decided at that point. But it's a much better indicator than the Globes are.
Fantastic. Johnny, thanks ever so much. Really good to see you, Johnny Hearn, there talking about the Golden Globes, which kicks off tonight. And, of course, all of those runners and riders, loads of you getting in touch. I'll take some calls after this break. The final part of Weekend Breakfast. Good morning.
Yeah, I think obviously climbing to the top of the rankings is going to be a goal that Luke will set himself over the next 12 months or so. There's a lot of major tournaments that we've got that Luke hasn't won yet. You know, he won the Premier League and the Grand Slam this year, but he hasn't won the World Match Play, and you know, the next major ones will be the World Masters and the UK Open that he'll have his sights set on. So, you know, Luke's got a world of opportunities in front of him, both on and off the hockey. He's 17 years old. He could probably have a 40-year career as a professional dart player if he wants one.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on the app, on your mobile, the home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back. Final part of Weekend Breakfast, 9:51, Sunday, January the 5th. I'm David Bull. John Pickard, good morning to you. David, I've never seen anyone take off and put on their glasses as fast as you. That's very true. It's very true. Well, I can see over there with lenses in, but I can't see here. Sage. Great show, thank you. That's very kind, thank you very much. We were talking about AI earlier. Jason from Worthing says, I cannot wait for AI to be involved in the public sector. The technology is nearly there to even take over the roles of doctors in scanning and screening for diagnosis of medical issues. This could be done 24/7. That's an interesting point, actually. It's got to be far better than the current system where you cannot get a doctor's appointment for love nor money. Bring it on. That's fascinating, but I tell you where I think it will have have enormous application, which is reporting of scans. So at the moment, if you have an MRI scan, you then that scan sits waiting for a radiologist to actually look at it and then do a report. Now, at the moment, we are outsourcing that to overseas countries, so it can be done overnight. Now, if you've got AI, which is extremely good at looking through multiple images and actually deciding if there is an abnormality, then that is a really good use of AI, which means you can get your results much faster. And maybe Wes Streeting has a point which then goes back onto the app where you see your results. The issue is, how do you then break the news if there is something untoward there? Because you still need to have a doctor to do that. I've been asking this morning, what is the biggest threat to Starmer? Who or what is the biggest threat? This is Graham in Graham Holland in Godolphin Cross in Cornwall. Good morning to you. The biggest threat to Starmer right now is people telling the truth. Thank you for that. George in Canvey Island, again, talking about the Starmer. The biggest threat, Maggie Oliver, that's the second one I've had this morning, saying Maggie Oliver is the biggest threat. And, of course, I interviewed her yesterday. Loads of you getting in touch with loads of different answers. Also, I asked our future politicians, what was the biggest issue for them? Was it the economy? Is it immigration? Is it the NHS? What is it? Is it prospects? The inability to buy a house? We know that amongst the general public, immigration is right up there. Andrew in Hertfordshire is on the line. Good morning.
Good morning, Dave. You do a cracking job. That AI thing that you were talking about, and by that, the Moorfields, the cancer within the eyes, if you do some research around that, it's an amazing story there. It's really helping turn that round. So
Absolutely
that's a really
right.
good use of it. So, look, in relation to Starmer, it will be a culmination of things that bring him down. You've got Musk, who owns a platform. A week is a long time in politics. Now it's an hour. He can drive the agenda because he knows what time people go onto X and like the posts he puts about Starmer.
Brilliant point.
He actually is driving the agenda. So if you take the grooming gangs, if he posts that at, say, 1 in the morning UK time, he knows that Starmer has to get up in the morning and respond to that. So he's really in a bad place. He is what he is. He's an elected politician. We have to accept that. But the best conversation about him was Diane Abbott. He isn't a politician. He was parachuted into Holborn and St Pancras. He's never actually been a politician. So this is very difficult for him. And Trump will drive America forward. We are going backwards because of the tax and the position he took. And equally, when you started to do this talk show all those years ago, they just said you needed a strong start. This government needed a strong start. And what they did was they shot themselves in the foot by taking money off pensioners. You can't believe it. So he actually will fall because of a culmination of social media, the fact they started so bad, and then the most interesting quote from Clinton, it's the economy stupid. It's not in this country.
How long do you think Starmer's got?
I don't think he'll do May, but in this country, it's immigration stupid. You have to solve it.
I would agree. And on that note, let me just tell you some breaking news. 61 migrants crossed the Channel yesterday. That is the first small crossings of 2025. So much for smashing the gangs.
I couldn't agree with you more. The thing about that is that if you just take the cup that's on the edge of your desk there, hold it and drop it, it's smashed. He's a lawyer. He used that word smashed. He didn't know what the public would perceive that to be. Smashed means ended.
And so let's just say he goes. Who would take over?
Well, there'd have to be an election. Don't you remember that's what the Labour Party always said?
Yeah. But remember, the rules change now, don't they? The rules have changed. And also, on that note, of course, we were talking about this pivotal inflection point for first past the post, because reform is now at a stage where suddenly the mathematics changes dramatically, and that's to do with the vagaries of that system. So there may come a time where actually the Labour government is saying, well, hang on a minute, we need PR.
Yeah, but equally, by the same thing, you and I know that those MPs that are on razor-thin majorities, all they're going to be saying, David, is put some policies in place. I don't want to lose my seat. Get rid of him. Who is the easiest person that they would put in? Who's weak enough to take it streeting?
Oh, you think he's weak?
Oh, God, yeah. I mean, he spins round more than a weather vane. He actually is spineless, useless and gutless.
I mean, that's fascinating. And, of course, he's got the great panacea for the NHS, hasn't he? Which is an app.
No such thing. I mean, you can't go into the NHS and say you're going to solve it. I mean, look at Jesus. He preached peace on earth and goodwill to all men. He got nailed to a cross at Easter. No one's going to say... No one's going to say... The actual population smokes too much, drinks too much and doesn't exercise. That's what you need to solve.
Yeah, Andrew, really good to talk to you. Thank you ever so much, Andrew in Hertfordshire. There, Peter Cardwell joins me now. I've been saying you've got 3 really big interviews coming up.
We do.
Look at me trailing you.
You're very kind.
I am very kind, you're right.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, is, as my colleague Phil Dave has been interviewing him this morning. We'll hear
the
from
legendary
him. The
Phil
legend
Dave.
that is Phil Dave. We'll be asking Wes Streeting all sorts of questions, not just about the health service and, you know, the solution. There's an app for that to just sort out the NHS. We'll also be asking him about grooming gangs, rape gangs, paedophile gangs.
Well, I hope you asked him also about the 1 million appointments that he's going to ditch post-elective surgery, which doesn't quite make any sense.
It's all going to magically work out.
Yeah.
We asked him about all sorts of things. We've got a big interview with him. Also, Tice baby, Richard Tice, will be here later on. And Chris
Have you said that to his face?
Yeah, of course I have. On air.
Okay.
Yeah, indeed, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I've got some really good news for you.
I'm Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary.
Oh, yes.
What's the really good news?
The really good news, Peter, you'll be delighted because you like a holiday. The Budgie Smuggler is back in. The Budgie Smuggler swimming briefs are the sexiest item, apparently.
Are they?
Yeah. Of clothes that women can wear. Magnet for women, apparently. Yes. So you'll be delighted that they're back in fashion.
Are you familiar with a side kini?
A what?
A side kini.
I'm not.